Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the March 6th meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Councilor Kane. Present. Councilor DeBona.
Present.
Councilor Finn.
Present.
Councilor Harris.
Present.
Councilor Hughes. Councilor LaForest. Councilor Liang. Present. Councilor Palmucci. Councilor Crowe.
Present.
7, you have a quorum.
We indeed have a quorum, and I did, just for the record, get a couple phone calls and text messages, some folks running late. We start this evening at 6 p.m., which is obviously challenging for folks coming from their day job, so I appreciate those that, are able to get here and make it happen. So before we get into the curriculum for this evening, here is the open meeting law, and it reads as follows. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit this meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. So before us this evening, councilors in committee, we have two items, the first of which is Council Order 2017-003, which is the adoption of the municipal finance policy and procedures. We're joined here this evening by the Director of Finance for the city and his staff, Mark Kavanaugh, who I believe is going to walk us through several slides, and then what we'll do is we'll open it up for some Q&A. Sound good? Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The financial policies presentation that I'll go through this evening is an updated version from the presentation that you heard last June. And the reason for the update is when I made the presentation last June and went through all the financial policies, I neglected to attach a formal council order. So when you took the recommendations for the financial policies into the Finance Committee, you didn't have a vehicle with it to come out of it with and to vote. So we've corrected that oversight. We now have a formal council order attached should you hopefully see fit to endorse and adopt the policies for the city. The numbers have been updated for this presentation tonight, not that many of them. We had the audited financial statements as of June 30th, 2016. We worked with an unaudited finalized copy for purposes of going through the review of the financial statements with the rating agencies. Just as a brief review of what we went through in June, all government entities utilize various credit instruments for debt. They issue bonds, BANs, which are bond anticipation notes, GANs, grant anticipation notes, and notes such as treasury notes at the federal level. Now, the debt's spread out. It spreads out the financing of capital assets, with the goal being to spread the cost out over the life of the asset. So we have everything that we ask you folks to vote on, from schools and public buildings going to 30 or 40 years, ladder trucks 20 years, heavy equipment 15 years, and down to police cars and computers, often at only the 5-year point. That's usually the cutoff. But the general goal is to finance assets over the useful life. Now, the financial policies are statements of guidelines and goals that will inform and guide the financial management and the practices of the city. These are based on the best practices of municipalities around Massachusetts, and they come to us as recommendations from our bankers, from our independent accountants, and our bond counsel. They're to promote long-term financial stability. And by long-term, I mean beyond this administration. It's a long-term view that we take. We hope that these policies would be helpful to the city of Quincy for generations. They provide a framework for measuring the fiscal impact of government services against established benchmarks around the state. The players, the people involved in who sets the rating and who gets involved in advising us on what's best for our financial policies, are first and foremost the rating agencies. They analyze the financial statements and the performance of the municipalities who wish to issue the debt. they conduct rating calls with the administration. Anytime we're going to the market, we know we're going to have a rating call with our agency. And it can be lengthy. It's usually about an hour, hour and a half, and we'll have about 10 to 12 people on the phone. We'll have the mayor, we'll have obviously the chief of staff, we'll have legal counsel involved, we'll have the bankers involved, and we also utilize our outside accounting firm when necessary, usually a couple of people from the rating agency as well. The credit rating report and recommendations are the final product. Usually there's 10 different levels of scoring. And if you look up at the chart, you'll see it goes from AAA all the way down to D, which is junk bond. Quincy is right above, right in between AA and AAA. We're at AA plus, are at about 9 out of 10 as far as a high ranking. So we're doing very well. On the calls, we'll discuss union contracts, city development projects, housing values, vacancy stats, unemployment figures, commercial taxpayer subsidization, stabilization, OPEB funding, CIP plans, and the policies that are before you tonight. After the call, it usually takes about 7 to 10 days for the credit rating report to be issued. And using this scale, Quincy's been doing very well, and we were recently upgraded to AA plus stable. The ratings that were given after these calls gives the independent investors a good insight into the valuation of the city's bonds, and it allows the city to get a lower interest rate than the riskier ratings would allow for a lower ranked city. Also within the framework of the credit rating, the reporting agency makes recommendations to the city on how to maintain or improve the status of the rating that they've been given. All of our recent reports, and I'm going back to 2015 or so, have indicated that we need to move forward with the financial policies that are in front of you tonight, as well as to issue forecasts, which we did for the first time last spring. This was a solid path to upgrading and keeping our high credit rating. The specific recommendations that have been made to you have already been discussed, as I said earlier, with the rating agencies. They've been vetted by our investment bankers and reviewed by Powers & Sullivan, our outside accounting firm. Additionally, I need to point out to you, since we've been issued the most recent credit rating report, which came out in January, the Standard & Poor's specifically said we could lower the rating if the city fails to formally adopt the recently introduced policies. And as a factor of an upside scenario, the carrot, we could raise the rating if the city demonstrates strict adherence to the financial policies and the practices that we hope that they adopt. Getting into the specific policies and goals, the stabilization fund, we've come a long way in Quincy since 2009. At one point when we looked, stabilization had fallen in the second year of the recession to about $900,000, and you'll see that at the far left of the screen. Through your help, through your endorsement of allowing us to put free cash aside on an almost annual basis, we've risen that up to a level of $10.3 million. For the purpose of calculating our reserve levels, which the rating agencies for a city of our rating and our size say should be between 5 and 6%, they also allow us to calculate in free cash. So you'll see the green portion of the chart is the free cash we were able to add into the reserve level and be counted in a positive way for the city as of June 30th, 2016. For the first time in quite some time, I'm not even sure if we had ever hit it before, our target level of between 14 and 16 million was hit. We were at 15.4 or 15.5 million, I forget exactly. And we were rewarded at that point with the stable outlook from Moody's, as well as encouraged to keep going. They'd like to see us add to that stabilization and reserve fund. The primary reason that they want to see the city's stabilization and reserve funds increase is to weather any bad storms, to weather the ups and downs, not just the inclement weather we've experienced in recent years, but economical downturns, recessions. It could serve as a replacement for lost income. Formally, the policies that we're asking you to adopt, one would be the policy to set aside at least 20% of annual free cash for the purpose of stabilization. That would be one policy. It doesn't limit us. We could set aside more. It's a minimum of 20%. We also have a adopted policy proposed to you for 20% of free cash to go to the OPEB trust fund. We currently have a little over $1 million there. It is a significant long-term 40-year obligation. We need to do a better job. They've specifically told us to begin to address this more aggressively. This would be a step towards that. A third step would be 10% of free cash going to the inclement weather fund. This is an additional hedge to the appropriations that you people have voted for each year to increase our snow and ice budget. We've gone from $300,000 in snow and ice in the mid-2000s up to what will be over $2.2 million that's proposed to you in May when we add another $150,000 to the $2.16 currently. And the weathers aren't getting that much easier, the weather fighting, I mean. So an additional hedge to go along with our annual appropriation would be appreciated and was welcomed by the rating agencies. The fourth and final grouping is debt service, and it's combined with a capital improvement plan, because last year we were rolling out to you the first of a 5-year rolling plan. So they took that into consideration. They were huge supporters of that so that they know what type of large spending is coming year to year, or at least roughly know what the city's thinking. They're more reassured by the fact that we continue to have a 5-year outlook from this year forward. So if there's a particular group of things, school buses or whatever the need might be, if we don't do it in year one, we've discussed it and we have it on the agenda for year 2, and we keep rolling that forward. That was important. Very important policy they'd like us to formally adopt is to maintain total outstanding debt of the city below the range of, or within the range of 6 to 7.5% of the current year's operating budget. We're well within that. Currently, we're at 5.6 of the operating budget, so we could take on more, but it's a healthy ratio. And again, these are benchmark numbers that are utilized by the top-rated cities and towns in the Commonwealth. In addition, outstanding debt levels should not exceed 2.5% of total assessed valuation, which is $13 billion in the city of Quincy. That's a ratio that the bankers favor. DOR is a bigger fan of the debt-to-budget ratio, so we've included both of them at their suggestion. The 5-year rolling capital improvement plan, they were big fans of, and we're already, we've done that for 1 year. This year will be our 2nd year when we come to you later in the spring. There's also a 5% minimum dedicated debt service to CIP. This has been adopted recently by many cities to show a continued commitment, even if there is an administrative change at the executive level, that there'll be a floor, there'll be a base ceiling that the city would have adopted to recognize the investment that's necessary to keep the city's capital assets in top shape and not let it slide for any particular reason so that we get ourselves in a hole and have to overspend in the future. That's the summary. I'd just like to emphasize that, I don't know if pressure is the right word. Yeah, I guess I'll use pressure. They spelled out pretty specifically a downside scenario if we don't adopt formal fiscal financial policies to guide us. They spelled out a pretty good upside if we were to adopt them and strictly adhere to them. So they've given us a blueprint. All of our best people and advisors have weighed in. They've reviewed these. They've participated in constructing them. I had a first draft of these written in 2015, and here we are in 2017, finally with a vehicle to go before you and get a vote, hopefully. Open it up to questions, Chairman.
So thank you very much, Mr. Kavanaugh. As I say a lot, because I know a lot goes into it, I certainly appreciate the professionalism of both yourself and the department. Before we transition, I guess, in a sequence of questions, I just want to kind of touch base with folks, because my takeaway from last meeting essentially was I wanted to make a point to connect with the outside auditor of Powers and Sullivan. And I'm only saying this because I have you here now, but to explore that idea about the excess revenue inside of the DIF account and what that may or may not mean in terms of keeping it inside of the DIF account versus leaving it as a sinking fund inside of the general account. Ms. O'Connor was kind enough to be on the call with me, so I don't know if you want to just, if you wouldn't mind just taking a 30-second kind of paraphrase as to what went on and what kind of Mr. Powers' thoughts were. And I only say that because it's important. This will connect into the discussion this evening, particularly as we form our attitude towards stabilization. So thank you,
Okay.
Susan.
Thank you. As Councilor Kroll stated, we did have a conference call last Friday, I believe, with Jim Powers from Powers and Sullivan, and what was discussed was the resolution that had come before the council, I believe, at the last meeting. In that discussion, Mr. Powers stated that it definitely could be done. However, it is a policy decision. It was certainly allowable. He stated that it would require a vote by the city council. And if there was money that was captured and left in the sinking fund, it would have to remain in the sinking fund. You could not take it out at any time. It could only remain in the sinking fund and be used for the DIF district. He said without a policy, any excess revenues go back to the general fund, which is currently what is happening now. And he did also say that the DIF stabilization fund, if the money was put into a segregated fund, the sinking fund, that does affect all taxpayers.
Yes.
So thank you very much. And he also did say that, again, it's a conversation that will take place. He did agree to come to the chambers and be part of the discussion. But I think Madam Auditor laid it out quite nicely, is obviously it'll be a policy decision, but any excess surplus revenue that's generated from the downtown, that if we were to pivot and go in the new direction and keep it in a sub-account, for lack of a better word, inside of the DIF, those monies would be taken into account by the auditors, by the credit analysts, when they start to shape their perception on our overall target for stabilization. So I thought that was a pretty good thing to come out of that conversation that I was unaware of going into it. But, like I said, I know the focus of the meeting is not on that, but whereas that was part of last meeting's discussion, I just wanted to kind of update the council that to be continued, and we'll invite Mr. Powers and obviously Mr. Kavanaugh to kind of talk through that to see if it is a direction that we want to explore.
The only thing I would add to that, if
Please.
I'm allowed, Counselor.
Of course. Please.
That things are tight. We don't have a lot of excess money. So part of the things that these policies before you tonight to vote on, taking 50% of free cash for the various needs I spelled out, are for that specific purpose, to make sure that we have formally adopted public policies, so we're adding to those funds. Frankly, because things are tight, because the revenue's tight, as you know, as you debate the budget each spring. And as Councilor Finn's pointed out many, many times, the votes that are taken then are going to directly affect what that tax rate is. And if money were to be diverted away from the DIF, other than just paying the debt, which is all it's set up for now, it would affect the tax rate, because all the money is used. Anything not raised in the tax rate pool would go to increase property taxes.
Correct, but you also don't base your policy decisions or your budgetary conversations around anticipated free cash flow, do you? You do.
No, we don't.
So
Right
basically-
now, we're counting on all of the DIF money, other than what's earmarked specifically for debt service,
Correct.
which we know a year ahead of time, is for the general fund.
So you are using that, I think RKG put out, I don't know if it was 1.2 or 1.7 in excess revenue. You are using that as you build out your budget? You're
Yeah, we're
anticipating-
counting that in the general fund. Anything other than what's needed for debt service. So as the auditor stated, it would be a policy decision to take money away from what's currently going to the general fund, which is tax money.
Correct.
Otherwise have to be made up by property tax increases. If it's segregated to the DIF and kept in the DIF, can only be used for the DIF, it can't be used for the general fund, which can only be supported by additional taxes.
Correct, and as we
But that
know,
is, it's a policy decision.
I think it's a conversation worth having, in my own opinion, whether or not we decide to move forward or remain as it is.
Sure.
You know, the DIF district has always been set up to be fully self-supporting and essentially
Yes.
its own entity.
From the
So-
get-go to be self-supporting. And
Correct.
right now, the only stated expenses that it's obligated to cover is
The
for debt
debt
service.
expenditures,
And
sure.
the large projects, as we sort of touched on there in the policies, you finance over time, and thus you do the borrowing for the bands and then the long-term financing for street works and sidewalks and things like that.
And just to kind of give folks and I'll continue on that, I appreciate you weighing in on it, but just to give folks a snapshot, because I wasn't aware of it either. It was something I reached out to the auditor right before day's end. I just was curious, like the last 3 years of free cash, right? Like what that looked like monetarily. In 2015, we're roughly at 9.7. 2016 was about 7 million, and this past year was 4.8. So you're looking at a 20-10-20, right, which accumulates 50% of that already being earmarked before we
I
even
trust
have.
the auditor's figures.
Right. So I just kind of want to put that out to folks to sort of frame the discussion and give you some historical perspective as to what is and has already taken place. So I don't want to strong-arm this entire conversation, so before I kind of continue, I'll open it up and see if folks have questions, comments, thoughts. Council Finn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh, and thank you for getting some of this stuff to us in kind of a timely fashion before the meeting this evening, and also thank you to the chairman who seems to facilitate a lot of that to us, so thank you. I guess I'm trying to understand this, particularly as it relates to free cash, is that, again, free cash is certified by the Department of Revenue. Is it at that particular point that these percentages then would be distributed to these various accounts?
Yes, that's my understanding,
That's-
Counselor, that it would be upon recertification, whether that's once or you're actually allowed 2 a year. You can get your original certification, and you can go back for recertification once more if you've collected additional revenue during the year and you want to have DOR certify another amount. So every time we're certified, in my mind, that's when the policy would come into place.
So it wouldn't be, and this is, forgive me, but trying to think like a mayor here, that we're not talking about the free cash broken out into percentages after, a certain amount of free cash is being used for other projects or other things at this point. We're really
It would
talking
be
about.
50%,
At
yeah.
certification, we're talking about that free cash going specifically to these accounts.
Correct.
All right. The only other thing that I would admit, and I think Councilor Kroll's, or Chairman Kroll's, is really a discussion worth having as we go further down, I think, beyond these policies, because it does strike me that it provides, in a certain sense, and correct me if I'm wrong with this, Chairman, but, one of the things we've been hearing, if these projections don't work out, so to speak, that it gives some cushion in the diff as it relates to not hitting the tax increases later on and putting that on to the budget, so to speak. So but I understand also the dilemma that you're pointing to. I guess the one thing that's confusing to me is I get when it comes to the idea of controlling the level of debt and that we're at 5.8 now, which is really healthy from my understanding. That's a great, great thing. And I get that, and I think that that's, as a policy of keeping our budget within that is important. But I have to admit, the idea of, again, developing a policy that says that you have to carry a minimum of debt, I'm not certain, I mean, that doesn't strike me as a great policy necessarily. In fact, it seems to me to be a formula for spending. And in certain respects, particularly because we're talking about the operating budget, it really kind of handcuffs this body in terms of trying to control the tax rate, because again, you're going to be projecting out. I mean, we've always looked at debt service in terms of the budget, that for it to be realistic and based on need and based on what we've actually financed and the like. But to include this minimum, who's promoting that as a great practice, I guess? I'm a little.
It's a relatively new financial policy. It's been adopted by some AAA communities who see it as a way of ensuring going forward, when administrations do change, that there would be a certain level of commitment to looking at whatever the city's oldest, weakest assets are, to put it another way, to be on the lookout for what needs replacement. These are parameters. They're benchmarks used by other cities. I don't think there's any rating agency that would fault a city for falling below the 5%. I think you get points for having the 5% in there.
Well,
It's
I
something
mean,
to be
where
conscious
I'm
of.
confused by this, Mr. Kavanaugh, is even if we adopt this as a policy, it's going to take us quite a while to be putting less than 5% into any budget, right?
agree.
Correct?
I agree.
So why have it as a policy? It seems to me to kind of, hamstring future city councils and their ability to be able to determine what that budget is and to cut from that budget where necessary.
I
Now,
understand
I
your
think
point.
we've had a fairly responsible approach. I'm pushing back here. I don't know when any mayor's approached here and been really turned away in terms of a specific bond issue per se. So I'm really I have to admit, I'm just kind of confused by that one piece.
I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah.
As much as I know about it, it's a floor to not let cities go too far below, to not ignore the capital asset investments
Well, I
that they
guess
should be
then,
making.
what's our role in this? Are we voting to adopt these policies
Yes,
ourselves?
it's in front of you as a formal council order to adopt the policies. I'm not saying you can't strike one and say you had a problem with it.
Well, my own feeling is I would like to strike that specifically myself, but again, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
So just to kind of keep it moving around the thought, stabilization, right? So the current financial policy as presented to us basically suggests a minimum level of 5 to 6% reserves of audited general fund revenue of the previous fiscal year. And I agree with Councilor Finn in terms of we have a lot going on. And, I practice the same principles in my house. Like I like to, I'm a saver, right? So whereas there's a lot of activity going on in the city, I mean, I'm a proponent of anything that we can do, to continue to save and increase our rainy day fund, particularly at this juncture in the city. It sits well with me. So I also had a conversation with the credit analyst just because I wanted to learn and understand a little bit more as well. And you're absolutely right. She did say specifically that it is, from a credit analyst standpoint, in the city's best interest to adopt financial policies because it makes things able to be determined from a rating perspective. So I could see what you're saying in terms of, we have a commitment to move infrastructure forward. We have a commitment to do X or Y. I mean, I get all that, but as I read the policy, and I I see 5 to 6% minimum. I asked her, I said, what are some other cities and towns look like in terms of their stabilization fund? And again, I just want to make mention that there has been a continued commitment to try to beef
Yes,
up
and
the stabilization.
successful.
Correct. But when I look at cities that sometimes we're compared to, like Newton, for example, I know their budget, they're a little bit more, they have a little bit more of
I
a
think they're
budget.
AAA rated.
8.7%. Brockton, over 11%, same budget number. Lynn, 8.2%. So where I understand we're trying to continue to push ourselves and get better, I also would be interested in defining a goal, like a stretch goal, like 10% of overall budget. So if you did some rough math, right, 300, 10% of that's $30 million. And I've also mentioned that to Mr. Powers when I was on the phone with them and some of the rating analysts. And what they told me is exactly what you said. There's a baseline where they'll look at your financial policy and your management policy and what's your stabilization, for example. Anything above 6%, that's actually going to improve your management component of the
Correct.
credit rating.
The 5 to 6 is a base. They want us that at a
Correct.
base level. They openly encourage me in every call to be, I
Absolutely.
should be shooting for 20.
They said 4 to 8 is adequate, 8 to 15 is strong, and I quote, those were the wordings that they used. So I think personally, and I like to state my goals in black and white so I know where I'm heading. I don't think having a stated goal of, 10% over time is unrealistic, do you?
No, we could adjust that higher once we have a certain level that we can maintain. We did hit it last year, June 30th, year end. Then we had to expend $3.7 million on the deficit in the snow and ice.
You
So-
hit what, I'm sorry?
Pardon me?
You hit 10% of operating?
No, we were at the 5.6% level, and at June 30th, 2016, that's the financial statements that the rating agency used to give us the AA+ stable rating. So they were happy to see that. We have to work back up to that level to maintain the rating and keep going.
So would it be out of the realm of possibility if we put an amendment to the language to say a minimal level of 5 to 6% reserves of audited general fund revenue of the previous fiscal year with a stated long-term goal of 10%?
Absolutely, that would be, I'd welcome that.
So I'd put that in maybe the form of a motion, and this is on page 1 of the proposed financial policy, which was essentially a Word doc. So, a second. Any discussion on the motion? Pretty straightforward. You want to call a roll?
Sure. Counselor Kane. Yes. Counselor DeBona.
Yes.
Counselor Finn.
Yes.
Counselor Harris.
Yes.
Counselor Hughes. Counselor LaForest.
Yes.
Counselor Liang.
Yes.
Counselor Palmucci. Chairman Kroll.
Yes.
8 members.
Thank you. And again, I know it's something that this is a policy document, so this essentially shapes our attitudes and our outlooks as it relates
Publicly.
to this stuff. So,
Right now, we're in a very, very good school, and you just said we're going to apply for Ivy League. We're going all the way.
and again, I don't want to, I could geek out on this stuff all night, so I just want to be mindful and see if folks, Councilor Finn?
So again, if we're in the point of amendments and motions, I would like to make a motion that we strike under the debt service policy and capital improvement plan, the last paragraph, which states that it shall also be the policy of the city that a minimum of 5% of the operating budget be dedicated to debt service. Capital improvements recognizing the strong need to maintain the financial stability and infrastructure of the city's most valuable physical assets on an ongoing basis. And part of my reason for striking that is that, again, strikes me as in a budget process, kind of suggesting a certain level almost of carte blanche to whoever the mayor is at any given point. And we've already, I think it's very acceptable that they talk about again, maintaining a certain level of debt in relation to the budget without necessarily, that alone should be shaping what I think is in our annual budget. So I would make a motion to strike that, the fourth paragraph.
Second.
On the motion.
On the motion? Counsel Kane?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where did this number come from? Where did 5% come from?
On the ceiling?
The one that he's trying to strike right now.
From, I had a recommendation of between, I want to say 9 to 12 different communities, from Cinda McNerney, from First Southwest, our banker. Well, I guess it's Hilltop Securities now, there's been a name change. And from all the clients she works with, she cherry-picked the best policies and procedures that she could find, that she had worked with cities and towns on to establish. Because the rating agencies aren't just telling us to do this, they've been telling other cities and towns that this is the way to go. So as they get adopted, she's been creating a file for me, as well as Eric in the finance office doing digging on his own, because we know who the AAA-rated cities are. They're the one notch above us. So Eric was feverishly researching all the AAA communities, Brookline, Newton. There's several communities that do a great job. We're in a better financial position than some of them, but they were a little bit ahead of us as far as these written policies, so we lifted them, actually. We copied their policies, and that was one of the ones that we put in as a floor.
Okay. From the last, I mean, there was a capital improvement plan that was presented to us last year. What was the percentage there, Representative?
On the debt financing?
Yeah.
It was right around 5.4%. I think we're at 5.6 now.
So I think I'm just trying to understand why Councilor Finn believes that this is sort of like a carte blanche, because I see the need to have something in the financial policies that illustrates the need to replace assets over time. But I've yet to see, in my short tenure on this council, a listing of assets in their lives as they, through each department, in terms of priority, and who maintains that? Do you?
We have a list of the assets, and we age them and have to be pretty active in communicating. We usually do it in the audit time, and we do it before budget time with department heads. Naturally, the largest department heads will have the most interaction as far as what vehicles have gone out of service, or snow fighting equipment, or street sweepers, whatever it might be. The bigger they are, the more pieces of equipment they have to manage, so we have to update that each year.
So then what's the alternative then? Is the alternative then we continue to go about our willy-nilly spending, and we don't have an adopted policy then that says we'll spend 5% a year? So you'll just come to us ad hoc?
I think it's a balance. I think we interview the department heads. I think we listen to their needs. I think when you have to deal with public safety officers who say they have fire engines that aren't going to last that long, you probably put those sort of life and death things ahead of snow equipment.
Well, you highlight a very important point, because, I mean, I don't think this is a listening exercise. This is assets. These are assets, and they have lives, and you know how long they're going to live. So it's not just someone saying, I need this, get me this. This isn't,
Right.
a kid in a toy store. I went and did some homework. I went and took a look at Newton, for example. And this is a 200-page capital improvement plan that they put together with details that highlight everything that you could ever want from each department, but at least it's listed in terms of priority, in terms of department, in terms of asset, and it shows over time how those assets will die, and you'll need to replace them. So, I understand the need for spending, every year, and to have this 5-year rolling capital improvement plan, but I'm just trying to understand what would be the commitment to providing factual details for the replacement of certain assets as we go along the renewal of this yearly rolling improvement, and committing to 5% per year.
I don't know how much manpower went behind that. I looked at something similar. Is that Newton?
Yeah.
Yeah. There were outside vendors utilized, and the contract price, I understand, was in 6 figures to help them compile a lot of that information. We're doing it on our own right now, with some guidance by our auditors only in how we set things up and the procedures and questions we should ask. So if we were to put a lot more resources in it, we could probably produce a similar document. I don't think we're that far away from the crucial information that's in that document,
Yeah.
being able to present it to you. talking about serial numbers and asset names and life and cost of equipment.
Well, I can understand sort of, I mean, I have a hard time understanding that department heads wouldn't manage the most, costly of assets per department. Is that what you're saying? So that there's no one?
I'm not criticizing the department heads. They're working with what they're working with. And I
Right.
know we went through a recession not too long ago and lost a lot of people, and we're kind of building up back to those levels where we were in 2008, 2009. We're also replacing assets as we go along the way. I think we could do a better job on the record-keeping aspect of it. I don't know if we get to the level of that 2-inch document on the assets themselves and the pictures and so forth, but we can do a better job than we have as far as giving you a detailed inventory of what's out there.
Okay. I don't think that helps me make a decision, but,
Well, as we go forward, we're getting better.
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm going to go to Council Finn, but just for the record, the regularly scheduled ordinance committee meeting at the indulgence of Madam Chairwoman has allowed us to continue this conversation, but it is 6:45. So just want everyone to sort of be mindful, and we'll take as much time as we need on this. I'm just trying to do a time check. Council Finn, please.
Thank you, Counselor. And again, Mr. Chairman, again, I'm not proposing against planning or a capital plan at all. What I am reacting to is something that I think's been a trend over the time that I've been here, which continues to somewhat limit the discretion of the council as it relates to the budget per se. And again, I think, as noted, I think it's responsible on the part of all of us to keep our bonding to a certain specific limit. But this idea of proposing, a minimum growth, so to speak, of 5% that's dedicated to our debt service. Our debt service should be based on the reality of what we're financing and funding. That's a very simple point, all I'm trying to make. Again, it's important for the administration in the budget process to make their case. If you start with a 5%, that somewhat limits our capacity in regards and limits our discretion, this body. And again, at the end of the day, the taxpayers are expecting us to keep some eye on these matters. So again, this is not a statement against having a capital plan. It's not about the value of having a healthy debt service in terms of how we work it. It's just that I'm reacting to having a minimum or stating a minimum as a policy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And there is a motion on the floor made by Council Finn to strike that section in the proposed financial policy. I don't know if anyone else has any further discussion on that motion. Council Palmucci?
So I just want to clarify what the motion, I have some questions afterwards, but clarifying the motion, you want to just strip away that language?
I just want to strike the fourth paragraph under the debt service policy and capital improvement plan.
Right.
Last policy.
Okay. So you're taking out the whole notion?
Just striking that specific, I mean, to me, the first paragraph covers the issue, that they want to maintain a total outstanding debt service payments at the relation between 6 to 7.5%. To me, that should be the policy. I do not think it's wise for this body to limit any of its discretion, as limited as it already is, around specifically the budget. And to me, proposing a minimum as a policy and us approving or voting that, for all intents and purposes, in my mind, we're limiting our own discretion.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I support the motion. I'll vote in favor of it. We vote for policies up here all the time. Whether or not they're followed or not is a whole nother question. We also have a policy in the URDP that we're going to push for affordable housing in the downtown. There's a policy with no teeth. So I have no problem taking this out, and I share the concerns that Councilor Finn raised, is that we're tying the hands, essentially, of future councilors who may sit in this chamber. We're an administration, not this one, but perhaps another one, gets up there and says, well, this is the policy, so, this is what's always been discussed, this is the way we've done it, the way we talked about doing it, so this is why we're doing it. So I'll support that motion.
Discussion again, the motion on the floor is to strike that last paragraph on the final page that talks about the 5% minimum. Any further discussion on that before we go to roll? Counselor DeBona?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 5% minimum, is there any cap on the spending per year on a percentage point, or is there any cap on the top end of this where it can be at?
It was recommended to us that we not exceed 7.5% as a ratio, as a percentage of our budget.
Okay, just to clarify that, okay. So 5 to 7.5% of the top
6 to
end.
7.5% is the acceptable range for a community our size with our credit rating.
Is that what's happening at the AA, AAA plus rating?
That would be AA plus and aiming for higher.
So just to get back a little bit on one question I was clarifying, what, in the terms of what Councilor Finn was kind of talking about, where we kind of have to spend, they're kind of pushing us to spend, and you're talking about adopting these principles and ideologies on how to spend. Of these communities or municipalities, do they still work out to be something near Quincy, Massachusetts, 94,000 people? How do they measure that based on communities and
These were
populations? And
recommendations by the investment banker. In some cases, I don't think there was an exact tie to, an industrialized city with 94,000 people and a certain percentage of immigrants. Sometimes it just made sense as a policy that the bankers thought would be adaptable to Quincy. There were other cities that, with the reserve levels being closer to 10%, in some cases in excess of 10%, that were right in our range, which they were encouraging us to get up there with them, to be more like Brookline, to be more like Newton, to put more in stabilization for a rainy day, put more money aside to reach their levels. So kind of a mix.
is there a combination of any type of, I guess I could say, the combination of having this, it's hard to explain here, giving you the notion, but based on what we're doing in the city right here and today in Quincy, Massachusetts, is all this economic growth, do they factor that in as a factor?
Absolutely. They're looking at Quincy as a part of the greater Boston region. They see that the growth that we're experiencing, in particular in residential values and some sprawling development that's coming more our way, they consider it as a region. They know specifically what the neighboring cities are doing.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Kavanaugh.
All set, Counselor? Okay, Counselor Hughes on the...
This one? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I just wanted to make a point regarding Councilor Finn's amendment and striking that paragraph, because I would be inclined to think that we will always carry 5%, a minimum of 5% debt service on our operating budget. But I'm swayed by Councilor Palmucci, as well as Councilor Finn's argument that it's not this particular administration, but future administrations and/or councils that we should be stewarding things for now. So I am swayed by the argument, even though I don't believe this to be necessarily detrimental or dangerous on its face, but thinking of it in those terms for a longer term and for future, folks yet to come that we don't know. And again, not to, obviously, nothing reflecting on this particular administration, but for things we don't know coming down the road. So I'm inclined and will be supporting Councilor Finn's motion to strike. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Any further discussion on the motion, folks? Okay, Madam Clerk, if you would please call the roll.
Counselor Kane. Yes. Counselor DeBona. Yes. Counselor Finn. Yes. Counselor Harris. Yes. Counselor Hughes.
Yes.
Counselor LaForest.
Yes.
Counselor Liang.
Yes.
Counselor Palmucci. Chairman Kroll.
Yes.
9-0 passes.
Okay. Any further discussion on the financial policies at large Council Palmucci.
Chairman Kroll, I was digging through my desk here because I could have sworn I remembered 5% being the number that we were given, not 6 to 7.5%. The last time Cinder talked to us, or one of the times that Cinder talked to us, and I found the piece of paper, and it's not entirely, it's mostly my notes, but, and I don't even know when it's from. The date on the paper that I referenced is May 1st, 2014, and it was a discussion about long-term bond debt service, and it was a schedule at that point prepared by First Southwest. And it just has some comment. One of the things that I had noted in that discussion was that the minimum recommended was 5%. So, but now we're saying the minimum that we'd like to see in a policy is, well, we're saying we don't, but
Right.
what's presented to us was 6 to 7.5%,
Correct.
right? I feel as though that's kind of creeping up on us. Like, that number just keeps creeping up.
That number was specifically increased by the investment bankers to reflect higher costs in construction, equipment, things we're bonding for, schools.
But so I just want to fundamentally understand this. I'm not a numbers guy as much as some of the other folks up here are. So maybe take it a little bit slower with me. But so what we're saying here is that 6 to 7.5% is our debt service, is the percentage of our overall budget that we should be spending on debt service.
Correct. Those are benchmark figures that if we're in that range, we're healthy.
Okay, and so our debt service is what we pay for essentially loans to the city, bonds to the city.
Everything.
Right. So, bear with me here. So the people who are telling us we should increase the amount of money we're spending on our borrowing costs are the same investment bankers who would then be profiting from the increased borrowing?
Correct, but experts in
Okay.
their field.
Right, experts in their field, yeah. Yeah, Wall Street, they're known to, I'll leave it at that. So that
what-
was 2014 that we were talking about 5%.
Yep.
I believe we were talking about 5% last year.
I think 5 to 6%.
So and now it's 6 to 7.5%.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I have the same problem with that has been expressed. And we're at 5.6%, which represents a far more measured approach to increasing our borrowing costs. I think, I was looking at this in 2014. This was including the track at that point and all the capital projects then. We're at 5.5%. So we've relatively maintained an even keel. I mean, we're up by 0.1%, which could be, result of some refinancing and whatnot. But that's a level that I'm pretty comfortable with. The other issue that when you were talking kind of struck me as not making sense is that in order to get a higher rating for the city, bond rating for the city, we would need to borrow more. Is that essentially what you were saying when you're comparing us to like Newton and some other municipalities?
The conversation that was had with Cinda McNerney regarding the increase in the percentage, and it was her specific recommendation to increase it, was in light of all of the development that the city is expected to participate in, I guess is the right word, as part of the DIF district. And in light of us encouraging and working along with developers and growing this DIF district, that we not tie our hands with a lower rating, 5 to 6%, that a more rural area or an area that's not going to have a DIF district with hopefully a lot going on in it wouldn't
Betting
need
on the
that
future.
kind of
I
flexibility.
mean, that's betting on the future. That's saying we're going to set up a policy where we borrow more money. We're going to borrow more money, take on more debt because we want to please the investment bankers who are going to give us a better credit rating, and we're betting on the future of the downtown, essentially, right? I mean,
Essentially, they're saying don't handcuff yourself with a lower number on what you see as an acceptable ratio. Give yourself some room. You're participating in a DIF district, a lot of development. It could require more investment by the city. Don't cut yourself off. Give yourself the room. and she recommended the 6 to 7.5%.
To go into the policy. So when you're saying give yourself, don't handcuff yourself to a lower amount, it's give yourself in the policy additional room, right?
Correct.
So if we don't have a policy where the only limit to the debt, which I'm certainly not advocating we go up to, is statutorily set.
That's correct, but
Right.
the whole, one of the points of establishing the policy and having it publicly voted on and endorsed by the council is that you're setting it up for the city. So with changes in administration, you're looking to a policy that's been carried on by the city council, voted hopefully 2017. So in 2022, they're dealing with something that was set up 5 years ago, and it's not subject to one finance director's thoughts on a matter. It's a
Which is interesting to me, because you're saying that's the benefit, and that's the exact reason why I voted against having that in the policy, because a much younger, better-looking city councilor in 10 years from now might not want to be handcuffed to that number. They might want to go the other way. They might want to say, listen, we want to be, less debt-laden than we are today.
Hypothetically, I agree with you, and they'd have to vote on that and
Right.
get 5 votes.
Right. And they could always change the policy or just ignore the policy like we do in some other instances, like with affordable housing in the downtown.
Democracy.
Right, democracy. Okay. Well, thank you, Mark. Appreciate the presentation. Appreciate the information.
Sure.
Any further questions for Mr. Kavanaugh? Just kind of wondering something, Mr. Kavanaugh. I had wrote it down, and I think you covered it. So this 6 to 7.5% variance, if you will, is or encompasses the DIF district as well?
As a total amount of debt, yes, they would look at everything, and in light of the development that's going on, maybe not just in the DIF, but what happens peripherally, Cinda McNerney said you should not limit yourself to the 5 to 6, you should increase that to 7.5.
So they'll
we
take
did on
into
her
consideration, obviously, the new Sterling, which we just bonded for, the anticipated parking garage that we'll pay for, any other underground infrastructure that we'll be responsible for in the downtown, the streetlight proposal potentially. I mean, they're looking at, everything comes up under one umbrella, and that is your range, right?
Correct. And we'll always be answerable to that and provide you with the detailed information to what the percentage comes out, whatever we meet.
And the analysts, third-party professionals, they came up with that target range, 6 to 7.5%.
Yes, but based on other cities' actual policies that they provided. It wasn't just an abstract conversation. They actually sent me the policies.
I almost wonder, like, when you authorize a, $10 million bond, like, how much incrementally does that increase your percentage?
We can tell you that.
That would be an interesting.
Whenever you're going to vote on an authorization, we can tell you exactly to the decimal point what it will do to our ratio.
Because 6 to 7.5%, that's like a 20% sliding scale, right, between those two numbers?
Roughly.
Yeah, that seems, it seems pretty large. Councilor Finn, did you have your hand up before I started?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one final note, and it might address some of the concerns Councilor Palmucci has, but particularly now, as you're talking about having set benchmarks for these various funds, and clearly at some point with free cash, you come back with an appropriation to those funds, I would take, correct, Mr. Kavanaugh, at some
Correct.
point? So I think, given the fact that we've set benchmarks, I think through you, Mr. Chairman, to the auditor, but also through your role as finance chair, if we could set up a way to ascertain that we're meeting those percentages as appropriations come in, that they in fact are actually consistent with the policies that they have in place, that could be reported to us.
You're saying a free cash time, are we doing the 20, 20?
Correct, so that the auditor can verify for us that those
Okay.
are meeting the benchmarks that have been set.
That's certainly doable.
I'm just
Sure.
concerned, is there language that's necessary at any of this point to make certain that this is this is occurring at the time once free cash is established, correct? This isn't after you're going to take percentage of the remainder, so to speak, after you've made discretionary
No, I think-
appropriations that are coming in.
I think that just adding the simple phrase, at the time of certification of free cash, the
Great.
following policies would apply.
Thank you. I would motion that we add that language.
Could you just repeat it one more time,
What
Counselor?
section?
Mr. Kavanaugh?
Doing this off the top of my head, it might not be exact.
All right.
At the time of certification of free cash, the following policies will apply.
You could do that right in the intro component.
So that's, you put that in the form of a motion,
Yes.
Counselor, correct? I'll
To add
second
that under policy, purpose, and goals.
Any discussion on Counsel Finn's motion? Which is to essentially put up a framework that distributes the free cash into set accounts once the certification takes place. Did I cover that correctly, Counselor?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, if you call the roll.
Counsel King.
Yes.
Counsel DeBona.
Yes.
Counsel Finn.
Yes.
Counsel Harris.
Yes.
Counsel Hughes.
Yes.
Counsel LaForest.
Yes.
Counsel Liang.
Yes.
Counsel Palmucci.
No.
Chairman Kroll.
Yes.
7-1.
Counselor, have you finished? or-
I am, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Okay. Any further discussion on the policies before us, or does anybody have any sort of takeaways for Mark and his team, or are we feeling pretty comfortable and confident with what's before us, obviously with the amendments added on to it? That's a question. Does anybody want to move approval? A motion to approve the financial policies as they stand before us with the noted amendments. Any further discussion on the motion? Madam Clerk?
Counsel King.
Yes.
Counsel DeBona.
Yes.
Counsel Finn. Counsel Harris.
Yes.
Counsel Hughes.
Yes.
Counsel LaForest.
Yes.
Counsel Liang.
Yes.
Counsel Palmucci. Chairman Kroll.
Yes.
7 members.
All right, I know that we have another accompanying item on this evening's Finance Committee agenda, but I also realize the time, and I don't want to rush you through it. So with that being said, could we adjourn the Finance Committee meeting? Councilor Forrest wants to go into ordinance, and then we'll bring you and your team back. Mark, is that reasonable?
That's fine.
All right. It's the school team, okay. Well, we'll bring the school team up at the conclusion of the ordinance. So thank you very much, Mark, appreciate it. Call this section of the meeting adjourned at 7:10.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Ordinance Committee and Downtown Economic Development Growth Committee for Council Order 2016-285. This is an order relative to the land disposition agreement, parcel H1 in the Hancock parking lot. Our City Council Attorney, Jim Shea, has submitted a red line addition to this body. I believe it to be in everybody's packet. At this time, I'd like to call forward Bill Geary, counsel out of the mayor's office, for that update. Mr. Geary.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Through you to members of the Joint Committee. And in deference to the fact that I know you have a very busy schedule, both with the Finance Committee as well as the council, we had hoped that Mr. Shea would be here this evening to walk through this, but we did want to submit it to the council. We submitted only the red line version that reflects a number of recommendations that your legal counsel, Mr. Shea, had made to the parties, and we adopted a number of those, indeed all of those that were made. There are still several more that Counselor Shea has mentioned that he believes need to be worked with. I would like to introduce, however, my counterpart, Dan Bailey, who is representing LBC. We've been working through various tweaks, if you will, of the LDA since it was initially submitted to the council, mostly along the lines, non-material issues of cleaning up the language, removing repetitive sentences, and so forth. Much of the format of the land disposition agreement is familiar ground in that it was the template for the O'Connell LDA, which the council reviewed and approved. Obviously, this is a different transaction, so the differences in this document reflect the differences in the two developments, with this one not being a 121A, but being an ad valorem, straightforward development. So that's by way of the update. They're in the red line. Mr. Shea, I believe, will be present for the council's next meeting, and at that time can discuss with the council the recommendations he made for certain edits and the edits that we make in accordance thereto.
We are going to be quick here this evening so that we can get back and to the Finance Committee. So red line version before all the councilors for review. Our City Council Attorney, Jim Shea, to be present at the next meeting. In talking to our clerk, we are looking at March 20th is the next City Council meeting. We'd like to get on the agenda prior to that. If you could,
Please.
maybe before we book that during our council agenda this evening, if we could confirm Mr. Shea's availability.
Yes.
Also, we anticipate by that point, the other outstanding document we're waiting for is the appraisal.
Yes.
Should be in hand into
Yes.
the counselors in advance of that meeting. So
Yes.
we're still in the homework phase of this LDA. We appreciate, Mr. Gary, your update. And with that, we are going to adjourn the ordinance committee and revisit this potentially March 20th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Finance Committee meeting back to order. Didn't realize we would be that brief, so appreciate everyone's hanging in there. Before us now, we have Council Order 2017-28, which will be a presentation. Mr. Mulvey, are you going to? Mr. McDonald. Welcome, Walter. Always nice to see you.
We see you. Good evening, Committee Chairman Kroll and members of the City Council, Finance Committee. It is a great pleasure for our team to be here this evening to give you an overview of the MSBA Accelerated Repair Project for boiler replacements at Atherton Howe, Marymount, Beechwood, and Wallaston Elementary Schools, and answer any questions you may have regarding the appropriation of $3,542,015. The city team consists of myself, Gary Cuniff, David Scott, and Paul Hines. Our OPM, Owner's Project Manager, is Hill International and is led by Paul Callis. Our engineer is Architectural Engineering, Inc., and is being led by Jonathan Breton. We were assigned a commissioning agent for this project, who is Consulting Engineering Services of Norwood. The OPM, the engineer, and the commissioning agent were all assigned to the city by the MSBA. All fees for the commissioning agent are covered by MSBA. Moving forward, I'd like to give you a brief history and summary of the project before Jonathan makes his presentation. Last February, the City Council voted to authorize the Superintendent of Schools to submit to the MSBA a statement of interest to perform a feasibility study to replace boilers that are desperately in need of replacement at Atherton, Howe, Marymount, Beechwood, and Wollaston. In May, the MSBA visited the 4 schools and deemed that they were all candidates for boiler replacements and boiler room upgrades. In August, the MSBA assigned the city an OPM, an engineer, to conduct a feasibility study for the boiler project at the 4 schools. In November, the MSBA officially accepted the project into the feasibility study, and on February 2017, the MSBA Board of Directors voted to approve the project budget funding agreement. We're in hopes of getting a jump start on this project during April vacation, with the official start of the project the end of June, with school recesses for the summer vacation. Our plan is to be substantially completed with the project by the end of September, and work in September that punch list items, et cetera, would not interfere with classroom and school activity. It's a wonderful project for the city because it not only replaces boilers, but completely upgrades the entire boiler room and all related equipment within the space. The city will receive 66.12% reimbursement of eligible project costs from the MSBA. Thanks to the efforts of Mayor Koch, Quincy City Council, and Dr. D. Cristofaro, the city has been able to participate in the MSBA Accelerated Repair Program over the past few years. Being part of that program, we have new windows and doors at Marymount, Wollaston, Parker, and Lincoln Hancock Elementary Schools, as well as North Quincy High School. Last summer, we installed a new roof at Marymount Elementary School. In this summer, we'll be installing new windows, doors, and roof at Beechwood Knoll Elementary School. It has been a great opportunity for the Public Buildings Department to participate in these projects and see the dramatic changes they have made to our school buildings in the community. Jonathan Breton will give a PowerPoint presentation of the project. So.
Thanks, Walter. Thank you. So my intent is just to give a brief overview of the scope for the proposed project, and then Paul Callis with Hill, the OPM, is going to give a brief overview of the budget and the schedule of the project. So you're looking at a map here that shows Atherton, Beechwood, Marymount, and Wollaston, the 4 elementary schools part of the project. So the intent was to replace the boilers at each of the 4 elementary schools. As Walter said, there's additional work that is included with that. So at the end of the day, we're going to have a fully renovated mechanical room at each project. MSBA is planning to fund 66.12% of the eligible project costs. The project is currently being bid right now. It's open for bid to contractors, with the intention being to complete construction in October of this year. And like I said, we're going to go through the scope, the budget, and the schedule. So the first school is Atherton Howe. So I'm just going to quickly talk about what we're doing in the boiler room. So what you're looking at here is 2 boilers. The one on the left was installed in 2007. The one on the right is the one that we're going to replace. This is installed in 1949, and it is more or less on its last legs. So the unit on the left is going to remain. The unit on the right is going to get replaced. We are also replacing an emergency generator in this room and completing additional emergency electrical system upgrades. We're going to be abating hazardous materials, providing a new combustion air system, and also subsequent to the boiler work, replacing the lighting, the water heater, and additional piping. This school is a little bit different from the other schools in the way that we were bidding it, and that there was an ad alternate. The reason being that we need to stay below a $500,000 threshold at this school so as not to trigger additional ADA requirements. So we've prepared several ad alternates in order to obtain pricing on this scope without being required to include it in the project. So that ad alternate scope includes removal of lead paint, replacement of a sump pump and a new pipe trench, replacement of an air compressor, new condensate pump for the steam system, and also a removal of a several thousand-gallon abandoned oil tank in the room adjacent to the boiler room. So moving on to Beechwood Knoll, you're looking at a photo of the existing boilers. These ones are a bit newer. They were installed in 1994. But with this system being a hot water system instead of a steam system, there's a large opportunity for energy savings. So our intent is to install high-efficiency gas-fired equipment. We also plan to replace the pumps with variable volume pumps, which will see additional energy savings over the existing setup. We're going to be installing new controls for the new equipment, LED lighting, a new water heater that's going to use less energy than the existing. We're going to be replacing mechanical piping and doing some additional upgrades to improve the functionality of the system. Moving on to Marymount, the school is a little bit more similar to Atherton. There was also a newer boiler installed in 2007. That's the one on the left here. The one on the right was installed in approximately 1950. Like Atherton, it is not in good shape, so this is the one that we're going to replace. Again, the one on the left will remain. There are also found to be hazardous materials at this school that will be abated as part of this project in the mechanical room. New combustion air, new heat exchanger for the hot water heating system. The oil tank that has been abandoned will also be removed as part of this project. New high-efficiency lighting, a new water heater, piping will also be replaced. There's an air compressor for controls that is going to be replaced as part of this project. And similar to the other schools, there's some additional mechanical equipment and painting that's planned. So Marymount is one of the 2 schools out of the 4 where we're required to do some ADA upgrades. I mentioned it briefly before at Atherton, but there's a dollar threshold where if you spend over that amount, you're required to upgrade the accessibility of the building per 521 CMR. So at this school, in general, it was compliant, but there were some minor items that needed to be brought into compliance. So the picture that you're looking at on the left is some minor modifications to the entrance. The parking lot is going to be having some small area regraded, and then some modifications made for a handicap parking spot. The plan that you're looking at on the right is of the bathrooms near the gymnasium. So new partitions, some modifications to the plumbing fixtures, and a new drinking fountain are being installed to comply with accessibility upgrade requirements. So this is the last boiler room, Wollaston. Again, this one is similar to Atherton and Marymount. The boiler on the left was installed in 2007, and it will remain. The boiler on the right was installed in 1949. It's in poor condition. It will be replaced as part of this project. This school contained hazardous materials as well, which will be abated as part of this work. The combustion air system will be replaced. New high-efficiency LED lighting will be installed in the mechanical room. And similar to the other schools, we're also going to be replacing the water heater, piping, the air compressor, and the condensate tank. And there is an additional scope to do a little bit of painting in this room. So like Marymount, Wollaston, because of the dollar value being spent in the mechanical room, we're required to do some ADA upgrades. Wollaston needed a significantly more robust upgrade than Marymount. So the bathrooms on the first floor near the gymnasium are being completely renovated. So the plan on the left is the existing floor plan. The plan on the right is the proposed floor plan. And so all of the fixtures, partitions, ceilings, floors, and most of the walls are being removed. So we're going to be completely installing new flooring, new ceilings, new partitions, new plumbing fixtures, new drinking fountain, and essentially rebuilding these two restrooms to comply with the required ADA upgrades that we need to do for this project. And I'm going to pass it over to Paul Callis with Hill International to go through the project budget.
Thank you very much. Just briefly, the total project budget, which has been accepted and voted by the MSBA at their Board of Directors meeting for the entire project, all four schools, is $3,542,015. The MSBA will reimburse and pay up to $2,245,090. So it's roughly 2/3 of the project. And there are certain items that are not eligible for reimbursement, including the abatement that takes place in the building, the removal of the oil tank, and other line items such as the legal fees. But by and large, most of the costs and fees for this project is going to be reimbursable by the MSBA. And briefly, the schedule, as Walter had indicated, the substantial completion to have the boiler rooms up and running and operational before the heating season starts up again. That date, September 29th, for the substantial completion. Heating season begins October 15th. And work that takes place outside of the environs of the boiler room, such as the ADA improvements, need to be completed before school starts, and the substantial completion date for that is August 25th. And if you have any other questions, we'll be glad to answer them.
Does that conclude your presentation, sir, cumulatively? Okay. So what we're going to do now, we're right at about 7:30. I'm going to recess the Finance Committee meeting. Madam President's going to open up the regular City Council meeting, and then we will come back to the Finance Committee where councils will ask questions should they have any. So at this point, I will call recess at the Finance Committee meeting at about 7:28.
Good evening. Welcome to the Great Hall. This evening is Monday, March 6th. This is the regular City Council meeting beginning at 7:30. Madam Clerk, if you'll call the roll of members, please.
Counselor Kane. Present. Counselor Crowe. Present. Counselor DeBona. Present. Counselor Finn. Present. Counselor Harris. Present. Counselor LaForest. Present. Counselor Liang. Present. Counselor Palmucci. Present. President Hughes.
Here.
9 members. You have a quorum.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. If you'll all please stand and join me in a moment of silence for those members of our military serving here and abroad, as well as their families and loved ones. Thank you, and please turn and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I thank you again. Madam Clerk, if you would please read the open meeting law.
Pursuant of the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived, by those present and are deemed acknowledged and permissible.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And at this time, we will recess to go back into the Finance Committee meeting. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Finance Committee back to order. Before us, we are discussing Council Order 2017-28. We've just had a presentation from the project team regarding this particular proposal, and at this point, I would open it up to questions from councilors. Councilor LaForest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. McDonald. I appreciate the presentation, the detail, the budget, and all of the information being included. It tells you, as you were referencing the 2007 replacements, I'm having flashbacks to Honeywell and how all our energy and efficiencies were going to be achieved during that program. And here we are, just about 10 years later, talking about our 1949 infrastructure that we're replacing and the needs that were not met through that program. So I remember taking on a tour of all the Ward 1 schools at the time by Mr. Pecoraro, and seeing what the different heating apparatuses were and how some of the schools had multiple, whether it was forced hot air, electric. It ran the gamut. It really, really did. So this is great. I have 2 schools in my district, both Atherton Howe and Marymount. I'm curious about existing emergency generator and conditions of the existing.
The existing emergency generator is in terrible shape. It's on its last legs. I remember when we, for addressing a lot of these schools, that generator was so old, and it had a 1986 oil filter on it that had never been changed. But it really, it's just held together by, I don't know what. And by doing this project, it gave us the opportunity to have a new generator in that for the school. And the best way to achieve this was to put that out. It's actually going to be outside of the building in a much better location. And it's going to free up more space in the boiler room. And it was a great opportunity for us to do that project under the MSBA, and we will be getting funding from the MSBA on that.
Well, I'll clue you in as to how it held up through the years. It was a legendary custodian, Mr. Red Riley. So he had his PhD in Hausneck Engineering, and I'm sure that's what took care of emergency services. But 1986, it's long past time. And I know in a neighborhood that experiences a lot of emergencies being cut off, and how we're able to, when in case of an emergency, utilize our schools as shelters, and we've been utilizing Quincy High School because of the facilities and really not having adequate facility in an emergency at Howe's Neck. We do have the mobility to set up shelter anywhere through the city and through different services. But for me, to hear that we're able to upgrade our generator with this investment is something that always is helpful to that neighborhood. The other question, and obviously, I appreciate the other infrastructure here that you're referencing. Both here, Marymount, again, another 1950. I'm curious about compliance with green communities and how this moves our green communities goals with getting more efficient utilities in our school systems.
I'm really not familiar with the green communities. I really can't answer on that. Shelley Dean could probably answer to
Okay,
that.
I thought she might have been here for that. We have goals as a community,
I would
basically
think it would be helpful.
having more efficient. I just wanted to see if there was anything through your department. Shelley is here. Thank you, Shelley. Shelley, you have been a terrific addition to our community. I know as someone who's environmentally passionate about our environment, and it's having you come on board. I'd love to just hear as to what you're seeing the value of the investments that we're making with the utilities and the mechanicals in our school buildings for efficiencies. If you could just elaborate on that.
Sure. In many of our buildings, we're doing upgrades. This is a great opportunity for us to replace aging infrastructure and aging heating plants. In one building in particular, and I apologize because I didn't come prepared to speak on this issue. I'm really here for the LED streetlights. But I believe it's at Beechwood that we're really going to, thank you. Yes, thank you very much. At Beechwood, we're really going to be able to achieve enormous energy savings because we will be converting from steam to hot water at Beechwood.
No, we're actually keeping hot water, but we're putting in high efficiency equipment.
I'm sorry, I take that back. We're putting in much higher efficiency hot water systems at Beechwood. So it's really at Beechwood that we'll see a lot of energy savings. The other, we don't have quite the same energy savings opportunities at the other buildings. There will be some marginal savings, but we will see significant savings at Beechwood.
And I think with the exteriors and the envelopes and the windows and the roofs that were done at these buildings, this is that next layer, right? So I guess more so as part of the discussion, how, as the city's energy manager, you're calculating and quantifying the impact that these investments have in another way relative to our savings and our goals to be a more energy efficient community.
These are certainly going to contribute to our reaching the goal of 20% savings. We're much of the way there, but we're not there yet. I think this project and certainly the other envelope improvements that you've talked about will help us get there, as well as the streetlights, which is why I'm here tonight.
Thank you. I think as we're saying, remove abandoned oil tank. These are, infrastructure that's been in place, that's been, just waiting for the budgeted funds. I think this is a really great opportunity of the administration to capitalize on grant funds from the MSBA to reimburse the city. We have very old infrastructure in schools. The school staff, the public buildings, the custodians do a great job in maintaining them, but we need to be investing in upgrading them. And, we did a lot through the 2007 project, but it's time for that next layer. And to be, in particular, for the two Ward 1 elementary schools, Atherton Howe and Marymount, to be upgrading 1950s heating apparatus. We want to make sure the kids are warm and the faculty are warm in the winter. Thanks so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Forrest. Councilor DeBona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could, through you, I also want to recognize Gary Cuniff and Paul Hines from the public buildings, as well as Deputy Superintendent Kevin Mulvey from the schools. I just had a few questions, just elaborating a little bit on this. The 4 boilers that you guys are going to be working on, if appropriated tonight, what's the lifespan of those? How long do they think they're going to last for?
30 years?
30 years. Okay, so we'll be in good shape with that, that's good. You know, in the last few years, and we've been on the school committee before, working with you guys, we were talking about Beechwood Knoll some years ago, and we put it onto the shelf, onto the shelf, onto the shelf, and we're finally at it right now. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, we're putting a new roof on there. We're putting new windows in there. And we're doing the boiler room.
So
all the
Beechwood Knoll got the gamut, they got all of them.
It's getting-
So they needed windows, doors,
And everything.
roof, and boiler. They needed the whole four.
That is
I
correct.
know we talked about that previously, you know, for energy efficient, we looked at the window replacements, the doors, we had a few roofs in there, boilers. With the other four, the next one on the agenda is Parker Elementary, and that will be coming on later?
Parker, definitely. Yeah, Parker is on the agenda as boiler room. And North Quincy High School, there's sections of roof that we had a statement of interest in on North Quincy High School as well.
So those 5 schools of the 19, we would be up to par with all the 19 schools for the boilers, is that correct? Or we still, a couple of them that we may have to come back for down the road?
We're still looking at that a little bit closer, and as time goes on also, in a couple of years, we're going to be able to, it has to be 20 years old to apply, to become part of the MSBA
Sure.
accelerated repair. We're going to have, we'd like to do Atlantic, Windows, and Broad Meadow, hopefully in 2 years, because they're in really poor shape.
So there's basically criteria meeting that threshold of that 20-year mark is
Right.
when we can
That's the
apply.
threshold, 20 years, but, right.
Sure, you know, to get reimbursed $2.3 million of 3.5, 66%. As more and more of communities, municipalities get involved with the MSBA, the pool and the percentage can lower. So we want to take a full advantage of using this program, especially for Quincy, where we're like the model city when it comes to that. And on top of getting Sterling Middle School up and running, possible statement of interest for Squantum Middle School, Elementary School. So, you know, if I could make it in a form of a motion to approve this, if I could, at this time.
Any other comments on that, or you all set? Counselor Liang?
I just have a couple of questions for you. So on the 4 schools, you said that for 2 of them, for Marymount and for Wollaston, there's going to be ADA upgrades. Are Atherton, Howe, and Beechwood already ADA compliant?
Go ahead.
So the roof and window replacement project that is going to be going on concurrent to this project at Beechwood is addressing ADA upgrades. So at the end of that project, Beechwood will be fully compliant. Atherton Howe is not compliant. And for this project, we chose to keep the amount of money that we were spending at that school in particular below the threshold because it would be difficult to complete the upgrades, cost prohibitive. The way the schools were arranged, it was a lot less expensive to do those upgrades at Marymount and Wollaston, so it made sense to include them in this project. But to answer your question, no, Atherton is not compliant. Beechwood will be.
And when you say that there's a threshold that you want to come under to keep it not cost prohibitive, is that a threshold to be able to be eligible for MSBA reimbursements?
That's a threshold as defined by the Massachusetts Architectural Access Board, where if you spend over that dollar amount for any building, then you trigger accessibility requirements.
Do we know what that amount is?
It's $500,000 for mechanical, electrical, and roof and window work. It's $100,000 for regular work that would fall outside of those categories.
Okay. And then just my second question is that earlier you guys had said that we're going to be reimbursed up to 66%. Do we have a final number that we're going to be reimbursed at full 66? Okay. Do you know when we find out when we're going to get reimbursed and how much up to that 66 we're going to get reimbursed?
Well, we may not use all the money that we have. We have contingency money in there. Some items we may do better on our bidding. So on all our other projects that we've done, we've come in lower than the project funding agreement. So, it depends. There's certain items that aren't reimbursable, but the majority of it is.
So the 66 that's here is based off of 3.5 if we spend 3.5.
Correct, right, Paul? Yes. Yes.
And if we come under that, then we'll get reimbursed less, correct? Okay, do we know when we're going to get those reimbursements back? I know that on here, it says that the scheduled milestones, the boilers would be fully operational September of this year, but the project timeline doesn't have this over until August of 2018. So is that when we'll see the full balance?
Finish the project. And there's the punch, you go through the punch list items, and it takes time for MSBA, they have a process they follow. And there's a whole checklist that we go through after the project that MSBA partners with us on. And it can take up to a year to get the reimbursement on that, but because they want to make sure everything is perfect and done correctly before anything is closed out, before they close out the project.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Thanks.
Council, there is a motion on the floor made by Councilor DeBona to move approval. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Ayes have it. We'll revisit this at the conclusion of the regularly scheduled city council meeting. We'll bring it out of committee. So with that being said, I would like to call the Finance Committee meeting closed at just about 10.
I'd just like to state that Dr. D. Cristofaro was tied up at another meeting, and Deputy Superintendent Mulvey is representing him.
Thank you, Walter. Great to see you. That's-
Back in our regularly scheduled council meeting. And Madam Clerk, if you will begin with item number 1, please.
Yes, number 1 on the agenda, 2017-35, an appropriation for $3,624,000 for the purchase and installation of LED street lighting. Be it ordained that the city of Quincy appropriate the sum of $3,624.
Okay, motion to waive the reading. Thank you very much.
And I'd like to refer to the mayor's representative, Chris Walker, at this time.
Great. Mr. Walker.
Madam President, through you, if I may, just briefly. The appropriation before you tonight for $3.6 million provides the funding necessary to convert about 6,500 streetlights citywide to state-of-the-art, energy-efficient, and cost-effective LED versions. The proposal marks the culmination of several years' worth of work by Mayor Koch's team and this council that started with the purchase of the streetlights from National Grid a couple years ago, followed by an extensive RFP process to select a qualified contractor for a potential LED conversion and a system-wide audit of our existing streetlight systems to determine the needs and costs of that potential conversion. The winning proposal for the LED conversion came from Siemens, and Clint Shuckle from Siemens is here tonight representing that company and the city to provide the council with details of the work with anticipation that the appropriation request will be moved to the Finance Committee for further discussion and deliberation. Before handing it over to Clint, the mayor asked me to briefly outline the administration's perspective on this proposal. Essentially, it makes sense in 3 different ways. Number 1, it's good for the environment by reducing our overall municipal electrical consumption by more than 2 megawatts per year. That's about 10% of our total electrical output that we use as a city. 2, it makes sense financially. The projected cost savings from the energy reduction will be used to pay the necessary financing. And 3, it's good for the quality of life of our residents. The LED technology provides a cleaner, crisper light, and the bulbs have a lifespan that is 3 times as long as the current sodium vapor lights that we use today. Clint will walk through the technical details, but I wanted to quickly expand on the projected financials in a little bit prior to this going to committee. The top sheet in your package tonight shows a draft projection of costs associated with the purchase after anticipated grant funding and National Grid rebates. This shows a scenario in which we bond the purchase for 10 years, and that roughly $300,000 annual payment that you see in the last column is substantially less than the cost savings we anticipate the conversion will generate. In fact, as Clinton will describe, between electricity costs and maintenance savings, those savings are anticipated to be more than $400,000 a year. And those savings for kilowatt hours are guaranteed under our contract with Siemens. If we don't meet those benchmarks, Siemens will make up the difference. With that, with the President's permission, I'd like to turn it over to Clint Shuckle from Siemens to give a brief presentation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Walker. Hello.
President, members of the council, and residents here tonight. My name is Clint Shuckle, and I represent Siemens Mobility, and thank you, Chris, for the intro. Just to briefly introduce myself, I've been with Siemens about 5 years and have done this exact type of project in about 35 other communities in Massachusetts and about 15 others around New England. And this is our 12th National Grid project as well. Prior to that, I was a department head similar to Mike Coffey for another city in Mass and had oversight of streetlights in that role. So most of my knowledge of streetlights is on-the-job training working for a city. The project that we've brought before you tonight has been supported by a number of city departments, and many of them are here tonight, some in the front row. Al Grazioso from the mayor's office. You heard from Chris already. The TPAL department has been instrumental in this project. Mike and Eddie are here tonight, as well as public buildings, and some of our, many of our energy savings figures have come from Shelley Dean, and the purchasing and legal departments are helping with the contract documents as well. As was mentioned, the goal of this project is to reduce energy and cost without the quality of the lighting on the streets at night, and this is essentially phase 2 of a project that began in the fall of 2014. Amazing deal. I wish we could repeat that twice, but the city bought the street lights from Engrid for a whopping $1 and ultimately got about $350,000 in savings from that $1 purchase. In this case, now that the city owns the lights, you have the ability to go and convert them. And as was mentioned, the savings are going to be in excess of $400,000 between energy reduction and maintenance costs. To break out those costs on the screen now, the current costs are about $657,000 for energy, $78,000 for maintenance, and that's by contract currently. And that adds up to about $735K current expenses. And if you break out what those expenses will be with the LED lights, you see a reduction of about 60% from $735K now to about $424K in the future. As Chris mentioned, this is a very significant energy savings reduction for the city. It represents about 10% of the city's overall electricity use. The usage going from about 3.8 million kilowatt hours to about 1.6. And there's various equivalents you can put to that in terms of tons of carbon reduced, trees planted, cars off the road, things like that. The project financials, to summarize, we can't quite do as well as the MSBA project you saw just previously at a 66% outside funding. We're going to try to get about halfway there. We've got about 33% or so of the project that will be eligible for outside funding, and I'll detail that in just a moment. The project also includes replacing 80% of the city's traffic signals. We've gone through each of the locations with TPAL and found which locations have recently been redone or about to be reconstructed, and so the remainder would get this full-scale replacement. There's a 10% contingency in the $3.6 million for things like police details, wiring issues that are found when the electrician is up the pole. The project also includes what's called a 7-pin photocell receptacle, and that's basically a power source for a device in the future that could be used to do things like provide Wi-Fi, could be some kind of traffic sensor, environmental sensor, things like that. It's a power source, and some communities are using that to do things both to control their lights and do other things as well. The project will qualify the city for a rebate from National Grid based on the city's ability to negotiate a higher rate. Typically, cities and towns get 25 cents a kilowatt hour reduced. The city negotiated for 30 cents. That projected rebate is $637,000. There's also a recent DOER grant program that will make the city eligible for approximately $450,000. So of the $3.6 million, there is about $1.1 million of grant funding that can come from outside city funds. The project scope, to briefly give you an overview of what we've been hired to do, some of which has already been done. The audit of the system, we've had engineers go out and find where all the lights are. We actually found your inventory is about 98% accurate. We found about 2% of the lights that don't appear to exist. You're paying for them anyway, so we're going to get them taken off the bill. Sports lighting is not included in this project, primarily because the burn time is much lower than dusk to dawn lighting. The fixture selection process we went through was, again, working with the city to understand what you've already replaced recently. A lot of the lights outside the door here have recently been replaced. We're not going to redo those, but we did identify all the lights that need replacing, either because they're high-pressure sodium or because they're older in age. We've carefully attempted to find the appropriate brightness for each street, as well as to match the style of the light that's there so that they look pretty much identical during the day. The project financials that I've talked about already, the savings, the cost, those are all guaranteed by Siemens through the project. And the fixed costs are set based on the number of lights to be installed again, and those have been carefully counted. The project would begin, if approved by the council, later this spring and would be complete this fall. And the scope includes about 6,500 different streetlights. About 90% of those are the Cobra Head style. About 10% are floodlights and various kinds of decorative style streetlights. The warranty on the fixtures includes both a 10-year product warranty And Siemens is on the hook for the labor associated with any lights that fail in the next 10 years, and the city is paying for that as part of the capital cost of the project. As was mentioned, the savings is guaranteed for the next 10 years, and that is done through a review of the city's electric bills, because the vast majority of the street lights are not metered, so it's a matter of just checking the billing tariff that the city receives on their monthly bills. Just very briefly about Siemens, we are based here in Billerica, Mass. We've got about 35 full-time employees, and all we do in this Siemens office is maintain traffic lights and street lights. So we're very much focused on this type of work. And we've done, as I mentioned, we've done very similar projects in about 35 different Massachusetts communities, many of which were also performance contracts. And we've not yet experienced a single shortfall. So I think it is relatively simple math, admittedly, to get this right on the guarantee, and we have not had any shortfalls to date. The recent projects that we've done, I won't name them all, they're on the screen, but we've had 8 different communities in Mass that are N-Grid, and then 3 do conversions in Rhode Island, including the city of Providence. This project is probably the 5th or 6th biggest one in the state. Most of the large communities in Massachusetts have done this since about 20 years ago when the utility deregulation happened and cities could buy their streetlights. As you can see from the screen, Springfield is the only one not to take advantage so far. And about 9 of the 11 largest communities already have projects either done or in plan. Any of you that have picked up a LED bulb, and I'll be fair, I'll say Home Depot and Lowe's, for your kitchen or your house somewhere, probably understand why this project is attractive. Costs have come down quite a bit. Electric use goes down a lot as a result. And it's a highly visible project that no longer sacrifices quality for savings. We had that with compact fluorescents. The color was awful. They took forever to warm up. You don't have those issues with LEDs. As was mentioned, the design life is much higher. And if any of you have gotten a call from a constituent about the motion sensor not working in the street light because it turned off as they walked underneath it, that's because sodium lights cycle randomly as they die. LEDs will not do that, so you will not have random lights turning on and off. The picture on the screen, it was just one taken in the middle of a conversion. Half the street was LED, half was sodium. You get a little sense of how the environment changes from an orange glow to a more moonlight type environment. As part of this bid process, Siemens looked at various LED manufacturers. We don't make these fixtures. We do the shopping for our cities and town customers. We look at how much energy they're going to save you versus what they're going to cost and come up with what the best fixture fit is for the different styles. And again, we do try to mimic as close as we can to what's out there so it looks the same. And the fixtures that we've proposed are ones that we've installed in 8 other communities around the Boston area, so we're very confident that this is going to give the city a long life and a high-quality light. And that concludes my presentation. I'll defer to your questions, do my best to answer them, or punt to my city staff colleagues. So thank you very much for your attention, and look forward to your questions.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Is that your presentation? Yeah, Councilor LaForest.
Thank you, through you, Madam President. My first question is relative to the savings that you referenced. You said that we already realized the savings of $350,000, and we were looking to further realize 400. Is it further realize 424, or is it further realize 74 for a total of 424? Page 3 of your slides.
The 424 is in addition to the 350.
So our $1 purchase came back with a $350,000 annual savings.
Yes.
Now we're saying through this process, annually, an additional savings of 424. For a
Correct.
total of 774.
Correct.
Annually.
Yes. The first phase was basically the difference between what the city can maintain the lights by contracting it out versus what Engrid was charging you. The second piece is changing the lights also saves more energy and further maintenance costs.
Well, we have very much seen a change, not only financial, but in quality of service with the city taking it over. It used to be, we'd put out a request for, traffic light out on a street. The constituent would call it in, and it was like Neverland. You were not getting an answer. You were not getting the service of the utility. Now I call into the mayor's office. They have a contractor out on the streets every week. I think Wednesday is signal day, lighting day, and it's getting fixed very quickly. So we've seen a substantial turnaround in the service that we, the municipality, are able to provide on the light outages. So the second thing I wanted to talk about, and Shelley, if Ms. Dean wants to come up and talk about the energy reduction. So not only is it a financial reduction, but 60% energy reduction. I take it that's the topic you were hoping to speak on.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. Do you have a specific question?
No, I
or-
just thought you might want to elaborate
Okay.
on what that means for the city to be able to make such a substantial reduction in our energy usage.
Absolutely. I've been waiting to have this opportunity because,
Shelley, could I just interrupt you really quickly? If you could just pull that a little closer, because you are important, so we want to hear from you.
okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
What I was saying is I've been waiting for this opportunity for the city to be able to first purchase the streetlights from National Grid and then to be able to convert them to LEDs. The city currently uses about 3.6 million kilowatt hours a year lighting its streetlights and floodlights and decorative lights. And these proposed replacements will use approximately 1.5 million kilowatt hours a year instead. So we will save on the order of magnitude of 2.2 million kilowatt hours a year. The city as a whole, for all of its activities, the municipality uses around 21 million kilowatt hours a year. So this is about a 10% savings in all of the electricity that the city uses for all of its activities. So it's a remarkable opportunity to save energy in a relatively easy way. So.
Thank you. I think the rest of my questions are for our Siemens representative. You had referenced smart technology, and this was something that I was pretty excited about as I saw this contract coming through, and whether it's the power source or the public Wi-Fi add-ons, hotspots is something I'd love to see the city, down line be able to bring on. But relative to the smart technology, we have been able to realize substantial savings and quick turnaround in our public works. And I know I saw the commissioner in the back of the room with our water department. And basically, it's the tracking software as to when there's an issue, it's proactive and alerts you. And is that something that we're not going to be relying on the constituent to say, hey, the streetlight's out in my neighborhood, we are going to have technology in the Public Works or Public Works Department or TPAL department that will trigger the repair? How is that going to work?
The ability to remotely monitor the streetlights, as you've described, is not currently included in the project scope. There was a cost benefit that was looked at, and at this point, the proposal found, or the recommendation was that monitoring capability was not worth the cost to install it. Part of the issue is that National Grid does not recognize any savings if you're were to dim or to the operating hours are less than they assume. So there wasn't any energy savings at this point until National Grid changes their tariff. So the current recommendation, there is more information about the systems, their costs in the full report, which I think you'll have a copy of soon. If you'd like to look a little more, and maybe if you have other more detailed questions, but it was studied as part of our report.
Right, I do remember some conversations about that. And is that something that, again, down line, we're then able to add on, or is that an add-on feature? Right. I think that, didn't the contract have it as a consideration, right? This is what we're looking for, this is the base package, and here's the amenities we'd like to add. For example, Wi-Fi hotspots, remote monitoring.
Yeah, I should have brought a little show and tell sample, but The fixtures have a photocell on the top, or photocell receptacle, and it's about the size, shape of a hockey puck. And it basically just twists into the fixture to serve as the light switch. It says turn on in the evening, turn off when the sun comes up. That, what the city's purchasing is that receptacle has 7 pins in it. So the only thing that would have to be changed is that hockey puck that sits on top. You don't have to rewire the fixture or do any electrical work. It's basically about 30 seconds, twist, turn. Once the smart node has power, it says, here I am, starts broadcasting its location.
What
So
was the
it's-
additional cost on the contract?
The gross cost was about $750,000, and the DOER program will pay about 10% of the equipment cost, so I think the net cost of the city is about $675,000.
But what we're saying is for the next 10 years, you're guaranteeing the labor, and it's on you to be doing the maintenance and replacement. So is it worth the
Correct.
investment of the $675 at this time?
Correct.
But we
And
do have
and
the
we've seen a
capability-
very low failure rate on these fixtures. I think the oldest ones, say in Arlington, are about 5 years old now, so a lot of this longevity data is still, kind of lab tested, but very, very low failure rates we've been seeing for everything we've installed in the last 5 years.
And let's see, 4 or 5. On page 6 of your presentation, it talked about inclusion of replacement of 80% of the traffic signal lamps. So you're talking about, the traffic signals, red, yellow, green, those lamps.
And walk and don't walk.
And
Yes.
walk and don't walk,
Mhm.
right. However, just the bulb itself is going to be changed?
Yes.
Okay, so part of what I guess where I was going with this is one of my field trips to our traffic engineer's office. There was the infrastructure, and it was kind of antique looking, and I complimented her, thinking she was a history buff. She says, no, Counselor, that's the spare parts for the intersection of Granite and Bergen Parkway, and it literally had a pull, a pin system, a pull-out insert to adjust the signal timing for one of the biggest intersections in the city of Quincy. So I was very optimistic in reading this, that we were going to be talking about remote monitoring of our traffic signalizations, but that is something that the hardware itself would then need to be upgraded. You're just going with the energy efficiency for the bulbs at this point.
Right. My company would love to help you with that, but it's not in the scope of work for this project.
And I can
We are
just imagine,
replacing
I can just
lamps.
imagine where the budget would go on that, because we are a very old city, and as we know, traffic and parking are two of the top topics. It's kind of the nemesis, particularly of this body, and I know with the progress that we're making with TPAL, we'll eventually get there. But just trying to understand, when you said the signal lamps, I thought we may be able to move to some smart technology there, but that is just relative to lighting.
One thing that is being done, there are a small number of signals in the city that the size or the diameter of them is smaller than current federal standards, as well as there's some walk lights that are too small. We're bringing everything up to current code as part of the project.
That's all. Thank you, Madam President.
I just want to remind folks, I know other people want to say something, but we will be putting this into, I believe this is going to be moved to committee this evening. And I just wanted to clarify if you could come back on the evening that we do discuss it further in depth, then hopefully we will tonight. Okay, great, thank you. So just reminding everybody, but I know Councilor.
Thank you, Madam President. And again, you mentioned about the savings, the guaranteed savings. And last time I heard that, we got ourselves into a little bit of a trouble here. But in relation to it, it sounds like you also have some metrics set up in which to measure those savings through the billing process. Am I getting that accurately? And so I guess the question I'm having, the other question would be, in the event, and it sounds like you've hit your metrics in the past with the other communities that you're dealing with, but in the event that you were not to, are there remedies that are contained within the contract that the city has with you, and to spell out what those remedies are?
Yes, and the city basically has two options. Have us write a check, or have us go into the city and find that equivalent amount of energy savings somewhere else and do more work to get you to the savings that was guaranteed.
Okay, well, again, through you, Madam President, to Mr. Walker, this is going to committee, correct? So one of the things that would be helpful, I think, for us would be if we could see the contract as well, if we could have that. And again, it's an excellent presentation in terms of the retrofit itself, but I think that might be helpful for our review as well. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Counselor Palmucci.
Thank you, Madam President. Appreciate it.
Going to committee, Counselor.
I'll echo, I don't know if he'll be here that night.
No, I know.
I'll echo the sentiments of Counselor Finn. I hear energy savings and payback period. All I can think of is Honeywell and the issues we had with Honeywell. Obviously, Honeywell wasn't a good situation for the city to be in. So essentially, this is promised savings versus the upfront costs, is what we're talking about here.
Correct.
And we've already saved 400,000 from the maintenance side of things? Is that what the
Correct.
presentation?
350,000 just through the purchase of the lights from National Grid.
Phase 2, it was the third page.
And so, yes, what
Spring
we're
2000
calling this,
result, annual energy maintenance decreased by 424,000. So you're saying the maintenance reduction was phase 1, 350, and the other result, phase 2, there was a energy maintenance decrease by 4. So can you just explain what you mean by those two numbers?
sure. The first phase, the 350,000 in savings, is the difference between what the city can maintain the lights for when it took ownership versus what National Grid was charging you before you took ownership in September 2014. This project has two components that add to that number.
No, I know. Before you say, I want to get to what's already been saved. So 350,000 was saved in 2014.
Yes.
Is that from 2014 to date, or is that just in the year 2014?
That is an annual savings number.
Okay, so 2015, 2016, it's 350,000 a year.
Yes.
All right. And then you're saying, as phase 2 went into effect, spring 2016, that there has been a decrease in cost by $424,000?
Not yet. That
This is
the
if we
phase,
do it.
right. The spring 2016 was when the city started this procurement process of selecting
So
a
that would
firm to do
be-
this work. So the savings would not occur until later in 2017 when the billing changes are reported to National Grid and the lights that are metered, those savings will happen immediately.
Okay, so this
it's
here,
the
when you
fall
write.
of this year when the savings would start.
Right, I get it. So when you write phase 2, spring 2016, result, annual energy maintenance decrease by $424,000. That seems to me to indicate that that's something that's already been done. When you say a previous date, spring 2016, and then say result, that seems to me to indicate that that result has already been realized, and it would attach to the date that's in the heading above it. But you're saying that that would be a future thing.
Right. I
Okay,
apologize
so that
for
would
that
be a result
confusion.
that we would
Correct.
achieve in the future, having commenced in spring 2016. Okay. So
Correct.
my question now, so about the actual realized benefits, the $350,000, where has that money gone? Have we established a fund to help offset the bond for this or to pay for this?
I'm gonna phone a friend for that one.
Oh, well, you stay there. I don't want to lose you. I'll ask you.
Going anywhere.
To Mr. Walker, the mayor's representative, the $350,000, have we been tucking that away since 2014 to help pay for this?
Operating budget of what we were spending in streetlights year to year, that there would have been a reduction in those costs. I don't have the budget in front of me, but we could certainly provide that.
Okay, but so we haven't been tucking that money away to pay for this moving forward, right? There's nothing, yeah.
I think Mr. Grazioso.
Good evening, Al.
Good evening, Counselor, through you, Madam Chairman. I believe back in 2013, a year before we actually purchased the streetlights, the budget was cut to reflect what they anticipated the savings would be. It would have to go back and look at that budget, but.
And that's the
I know
DPW budget, right? Because
that
this,
was the-
this whole thing was
At the time,
under
it
the
was
DPW
DPW, I
budget.
believe, Counselor, yes.
Okay, all right. Why don't you stay up there? Are you done with that piece?
Yes.
I don't want to cut you off. Okay. So The rollout for this thing is summer, fall 2017. So this summer into the fall, 6,500 lights to be swapped over.
Correct.
That's the total, 6,500.
I believe that's the number, Clint?
That's the number that's in here, but that's everything, right? That's not like just one phase of it. Okay. So we would borrow all this money up front, the $2.6 million. We would borrow up front, and then the work would commence with everything right off the bat.
Correct. It's somewhat similar to the SBA, where we're required to borrow the money up front before we can get the grant money.
Okay. Okay. And is there any way that we could approach this in a more phased approach where, you know, we did it in a quarter at a time to ensure that we realize the energy savings that have been promised? I mean, again, I have Honeywell in my head and the issue. I wasn't on this, I didn't sit on this body when the Honeywell deal was passed, but I sat on the body when some of the Honeywell issues were discovered, and we had to pay, you know, we had to authorize additional expenditure to cover what Honeywell left us holding the bag on. So with Honeywell in my mind, I'm curious as to whether or not we could limit risk on this in terms of rolling it out in a more phased approach, where if it's 6,500 for everything, could you start with, you know, 1,500, do 1,500, 1,500, 1,500?
I guess I would.
Wood Fork could be last,
I
as has
would
been pointed out.
defer to Clint on that, but I think, you know, I would look back to the other communities that have done this successfully, and you know, I think the success rate is 100%. But I would defer to Clint on that one. I would think that the price we got in the bid was reflective of them coming in and doing this job all at once.
That would be more expensive if we phased, if we did it in phases. Okay. All right, well, I mean, that covers my questions, you know, off the top of my head. I'm sure we'll get more into it, but I'd like to get more information about that as to, you know, why that approach is better. Because I'm not saying a phase approach is better, but I'd like to know that the approach we're being presented with is better than some other one. So thank you, Al, appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilor DeBona.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have one question. Is it Clint? Is it Clint? Clint, how you doing? Thank you for your presentation. It was going to go committee. We'll talk more about it. But there's going to be a new term up here. I used to use it in the budget process, needs versus wants. There's going to be a new thing called TBL, the bottom line. 3.624 is the amount for appropriation. You said 33% is going to be reimbursed with a grant. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Of that 33% reimbursement, you're saying there's 774,000 savings per year. Is that correct?
That is the combination of the two, the purchasing of the lights in 2014 and then this project.
So the
2016.
bottom line is, when do we get, or when are we guaranteed to get the return on that 3.624? What year?
Right.
Because that's what most people, I think, in the public eye are looking to see. When do we get our return? You guys are going to do 3.6 if it's appropriated. When does the city, you know, get that return? What year? So do you,
The only snag that we've run into throughout this process, and I think you had a bit of it in the purchase, is that we've got to have NGrid adjust your bills. And we submit the information to NGrid within a week or two of installing these lights. And that is something we phase because we don't want to wait till the end of the project till we start reporting. That can take a couple billing cycles. So if we were to finish this project October, November timeframe, it's probably January, February timeframe where the actual bill is reduced by National Grid. Because again, these lights aren't metered. So it's not like changing the bulb in your kitchen where, you know, your electric meter automatically registers the change. This requires some cooperation from National Grid to make your bills what they should be. So I would say early 2018 is when those bills will come down to reflect the LED lights.
so do you have it, I don't have my calculator with me, 3.6, and you said 33% is going to be in a form of a grant or a rebate. So that, when is that going to come back to the city of Quincy?
Those typically come in between 30 and 45 days after we report to NGRID that the project is complete.
Okay, and do you have an,
They'll often come out and do like a drive-by or inspect a few of the lights just to make sure the city actually did the work.
so roughly, I'm looking at 3.6, a third of it is 1.2. So $1.2 million is going to come back roughly around those days to the city.
Yes, I think it's closer to 1.1. But
Okay.
again, it's based on the kilowatt hours reduced, so we'll know that exact number once the project is completed. And then the DOER grant is essentially calculated after you get the NGRID rebate.
Okay.
We're projecting that to be 450,000.
So now we're at 2.5 million, okay? So now we take the 774 that we were talking about in savings of the yearly savings, and where are we going to get at, yep, right there. So we get at 774 for savings per year of the 2.5. What, we're looking at, 1, 2, 3, looking about third year. In the third year, we start to save and the money comes, in.
And the difference, we didn't count that
There it is,
first
right there.
350,000 in the payback numbers. We just counted the 424. So actually, all of those payback numbers on the screen can take them, divide them by 2 roughly, if you took into account what the city saved just from buying the lights.
Okay, we'll go more in discussion. I just kind of wanted the viewer, we were talking about this. A lot of viewers are watching based on next stuff coming up. But just to give a rough estimate, when we're getting ready to go into budget season as well, numbers are all over the place right now. And the council is on, to make sure that we're going to be doing the right thing moving forward with efficiency. We're talking a lot of efficiency, a lot of appropriations. I just want to make sure that we're going in the right direction for this allocation, which I think it is, because we're going to get our money back at some point with the investment of energy efficient. Thank you, Madam President.
All right, having not previously been heard, Counselor?
I'm
No?
good. I found
You're
it.
good?
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Kroll?
Madam President, I would like to make a motion to refer this to Finance Committee. For
Great
a-
idea, Counselor
For
Kroll.
a more substantive conversation in Clint?
Yes.
right? You'll be available, I know.
will
Madam
be.
Okay, so that will be that. Thank you.
All
Madam
right,
President.
so motion to move it to finance, and I think maybe a joint referral to public buildings. Counselor Kane, okay. Is there a second? Second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great, the ayes have it. So we will put that in finance and public buildings to be scheduled.
No, but right?
Next item, Madam Clerk.
Number 2 on the agenda, 2017-016, adoption of the 2017 political calendar.
Great. Madam Clerk?
So the council has put this into oversight, and we believe we've looked at it, and it's moving forward tonight.
All right, motion to approve by Counselor Palmucci, seconded by Counselor Harris. On the motion, anyone wishing to speak? All right, seeing no.
Can I just speak?
Yes, Counselor Palmucci.
Just very briefly, more as kind of just throw it out there as a topic for later on. I really do think that we should be considering as we move forward, perhaps now is not the time to start the discussion, but before the next municipal election is talk about what, we obviously don't want to bar folks from running for office, but some of the timelines and some of the hurdles aren't really much of hurdles or timelines. I mean, we all get, those who run for office, you get like 3 months to collect 50 signatures. In other communities, they do some different things. At-large councilors have to collect a certain number of signatures from each of the wards or districts that they represent. Also, I think something worth considering is whether or not it makes sense to have a mayoral candidate have to only collect 50 signatures citywide when that's the same hurdle that you have for a ward counselor. So just kind of food for thought as we move forward. I think this is something that we as a body should discuss and just talk about. I don't know when the last time it was changed. I'm going to guess it was, generations ago. So
Same time as the boilers at Atherton.
right, same time. So I'm going to vote in favor of this, but it's something as we move towards a 2019 city political calendar, we may want to think about what updating we should be doing. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Palmucci. So motion, is there any further discussion? Yes, Counselor Finn.
Thank you. Through you, Madam President, to the clerk. This is essentially the same that you presented before that we had held for a while. It's the same schedule.
Through you, Madam President, to Councilor Finn. It is, and we generally follow the state statute under Mass General Law, Chapter 43, under the Charter Plan A, but we can, of course, look further into it and make some changes if you so wish.
Well, just again, for people who are watching, because who knows, right? People may be interesting, that the nomination papers are actually going to be released on May 2nd.
Which is past practice of
Right.
the first Tuesday in May.
Fantastic.
Yes.
And then the deadline for submitting those to you would be July 25th.
That's right.
And then you need to file them by August 8th, but anybody who's interested in running needs to have those in by July 25th. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great, thanks. Just for Counselor at Large. We may have a few, but I would second the motion, and thank you, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Counselor Finn. Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, seeing no one, Madam Clerk, if you could call the roll.
Counselor Kane. Yes. Counselor Kroll.
Yes.
Counselor DeBona. Yes. Counselor Finn.
Yes.
Counselor Harris.
Yes.
Counselor LaForest. Yes. Counselor Liang. Yes. Counselor Palmucci.
Yes.
President Hughes.
Yes.
9 members.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next
Next
item.
item on the agenda is 2017-36, ordinance amending municipal code Title 5, Business Licenses and Regulations, to add a new chapter, Chapter 5.10, Absentee Landlord Regulations, Registration Program, Rental and Housing Regulations. I would like to refer to Councilor Palmucci.
Okay, motion to waive the reading by Counselor Palmucci. Counselor Palmucci.
Thank you. There's a copy in here. I would encourage the colleagues to read it. It's rather long. This ordinance would create a system of registration and inspection of apartments in the city of Quincy with a particularly robust discipline structure. Now, the purpose of Counselor Harris and LaForest, Counselor LaForest should be a co-sponsor of this as well. But the purpose of Counselor Harris, Counselor LaForest, and myself putting this legislation together is to really crack down on absentee landlords. That's who this addresses, and specifically the absentee landlords who don't take care of their properties. Anyone who lives near one of these properties knows how they can drag down the quality of life in a neighborhood. They tend to attract tenants who cause problems because there is no oversight at these buildings. They're unsightly, the properties become run down. They become not only a hazard to the residents living there, but also to the community at large. This legislation would create, as I said, the most robust system of laws regulating absentee landlords, I think, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. It's a first of its kind in Massachusetts because of the depth and the breadth that it takes in terms of regulating and disciplining wayward absentee landlords. Now, I expect as this progresses through the legislative process that we'll have public hearings on this to solicit feedback from residents and landlords in the coming months. And as with anything that I participate in introducing to this body, I'm certainly open to working with other counselors, working with concerned residents, property owners, to shape something that makes sense for everybody and that it still achieves the same goals that Counselor Harris, LaForest, and I are setting out here. We see that this is a kind of a first draft that may change during the legislative process. We're open to that. And I look forward to, in the coming months, to working directly with those who would most be impacted by this legislation. As I said, I think if a landlord reads this, they might say, oh no, what are they doing? But the target is absentee landlords who don't take care of their properties. Who I expect we'll hear from is not from absentee landlords who don't take care of their properties, but from those landlords that we all know very well who do take care of their properties and have significant apartment rentals in the city that have a lot of properties. They generally take care of them. They're the folks that we interact with, in the Chamber of Commerce and in other areas. So I expect we'll hear from them. I anticipate mailing the copies of this out to the Chamber of Commerce and to several of the property owners in the city that own large stakes of apartments, just to begin that discussion and to receive that feedback. So I would ask that this be referred to both ordinance and oversight committee, and that it be advertised. And we'll have some further hearings on it in the coming months.
All right, so referral to ordinance and oversight. Is there a second? Second, Councilor Harris. All those in favor? Aye, great. Okay, so we will do that. I just want to commend my council colleagues, yes, Councilor Finn, on this. As a ward councilor, we all know the effect of absentee landlord properties. It's always the sort of same ones that we see coming up being problematic to folks in the neighborhood. And so it's again, as Councilor Palmucci pointed out, working together to find a solution to that problem is important. And I look forward to the discussion because it is something that plagues our neighborhoods, but also the solution is not easy. And so it's a good discussion starter. So thank you all for co-sponsoring that. Councilor Finn.
Thank you, Madam President. I just would request, if it hasn't already been, that a draft also be sent to the city solicitor for his review.
All right. We will do that.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you. Oh, we didn't vote. I said all those in favor? Yeah. The ayes had it. Next item, Madam Clerk.
Number 4 on the agenda, 2017-37, a gift for $2,475.
Read the reading, please, but make sure there is a letter sent just acknowledging and thanking.
We have to accept the gift. All right, so motion to accept the gift by Councilor Kroll, seconded by Councilor DeBona. On the motion, Madam Clerk?
Councilor Kane. Yes. Councilor Kroll.
Yes.
Councilor DeBona.
Yes.
Councilor Finn.
Yes.
Councilor Harris. Councilor LaForest.
Yes.
Councilor Liang.
Yes.
Councilor Palmucci.
Yes.
President Hughes.
Yes.
9 members.
Great, thank you. All right, so that ends our listed agenda items this evening. Next, we'll move to the approval of previous meeting minutes, which you have before you, the meeting minutes from February 21st. Is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve by Councilor DeBona, seconded by Councilor Liang. All those in favor? Aye, ayes have it. Great, the minutes are approved. Communications and reports from the mayor, other city officers and city boards. Madam Clerk?
I don't have anything at this time.
No communications, okay. Any unfinished business from the preceding meeting? Yes, Councilor Liang.
Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to reintroduce Council Order 2017-31, which was introduced at our prior council meeting and was objected to. So I'd like to bring it forward at this council meeting to open it up for discussion again.
All right, so Councilor Liang has brought Council Order 2017-31, which is on our council calendar, to the body. Is there anyone wishing to be heard at this time? Councilor Liang, you're still on.
Thank you, Madam President.
Yeah.
I just want to take this moment to clarify for everyone that I offer this resolution to acknowledge an important conversation that's taking place across our nation, but more importantly, in our neighborhoods here in the city. As a deliberative body of the Quincy government, I believe it's important that we take a lead in this constructive conversation and better understand what people are concerned about. This term, sanctuary city, has been thrown around a lot, and many communities are debating whether or not to adopt that designation. And to be clear, that's not what my resolution calls for. I'm neither advocating in favor of nor against a sanctuary city designation for Quincy, and this resolution is simply about having a community-wide open discussion about these issues. For example, our local law enforcement, through their policies and procedures, are ensuring that the people who call Quincy home feel safe and secure in our community. But I think it's safe to say that there's not a wide knowledge of these procedures. My resolution calls on us, as the elected leaders of the city, to engage in a constructive conversation to begin a process of fact-finding and education, again, to get the facts. Of the counselors here today, I believe that we'd have different arguments as to what this term calls for, which doesn't have an actual definition. In this, we are no different than the people that we represent and the people in this room. In a time of fake news and alternative facts coming from both sides of the spectrum, it's our job and our responsibility to rise above and to get the facts. I believe a well-informed and engaged public is the best way that we can all move forward together. This issue of expanding the conversation and getting more people involved was central to why I ran, and it's very dear to my heart. We chose to run for office to serve the people of Quincy, and part of that service is bringing the community together for these kinds of conversations. Again, many communities have rushed into making a decision on this issue with little to no conversation or understanding. It's led to confusion and more misunderstanding on both sides of the issue. Taking a step to have a community-wide discussion is what I believe to be the only responsible way to look at this issue. Again, my resolution calls on the city, by way of collaboration between the administration, city council, department heads, and other appropriate parties to engage in a thorough inquiry, including members of the community, to discuss the city's policies and procedures as they relate to federal immigration regulation and the potential local impact. We bring together community leaders, public officials, academics, advocates, and opponents on this issue to meet and talk about what this designation actually means. Quincy is our city, all of us. Not just this body, not just the folks in this room, but everyone. And everyone deserves to be part of that same conversation. Today, I'm asking my colleagues on the council for support on this resolution to have the discussion, to acknowledge that the conversation's already taken place in our neighborhoods, and to include our city's government in that conversation. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to move this to public safety and community engagement committees to engage in that conversation. And I understand my colleagues would also like to speak on that, but I'd like to make sure to introduce that motion as well. Thank you.
So motion by Councilor Liang. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Councilor Harris. On the motion, anyone wishing to speak? Councilor DeBona.
Thank you, Madam President. I took an oath over a year ago when I was first sworn in as a counselor at large. That oath was to obey the Constitution and to follow the rules and laws of the land. I also made a commitment to protect the taxpayers of the city of Quincy. My top priorities as a city councilor are education, public safety, and public works. This includes education in our Quincy public schools, making sure our police officers and firefighters have the proper resources to keep our city safe, making sure our public works department have the proper funding for new roads, sidewalks, and infrastructure improvements, while mitigating the traffic and parking concerns. We as a city depend on federal funding to help our taxpayers. The biggest area we rely on federal funding is in our Quincy public schools. We rely on $7.8 million of direct federal funding. Of that 7.8, 5.6 million of it is through 14 grants, which include the Title I funding for Snug Harbor, Clifford Marshall, Lincoln Hancock, and Parker Elementary Schools. Another important federal grant is the special education funding, which rely on our children with learning disabilities like autism and reading disabilities, including dyslexia. And the other $2.2 million we rely on is a national school lunch program for our kids. Being a former school committee member, I've been through the budget process. I will tell you, every year, we wish we had more funding for other programs. We've come a long way with the budget cuts some 8 to 12 years ago. We've been pioneers with building new schools like Quincy High School in 2010, Central Middle School in 2013, and we were just underway with the construction of the new Sterling Middle School. We have a statement of interest also with the MSBA for a new Squantum Elementary School with the years to come. I would not want to flirt with the possibility of not being able to build a new elementary school in Squantum. On the city side, we have taken advantage of $20 million of federal transportation funding over the last 8 years, an average of $2.5 million a year for the Adams Hancock Green right outside here, Hannon Parkway, and MBTA station improvements. We have hired firefighters using federal money, as well as receiving Homeland Security equipment. Overall, the city of Quincy receives roughly $10.3 million a year of federal funding. $7.8 million is allocated for the Quincy Public Schools and $2.5 on the average on the city side. We're going to go into a little math here. For every $1 million the taxpayer has to pay $25 on that million. $10.3 million times $25 is $257. So if we lost all our federal funding, every taxpayer would have to pay an extra $257 yearly on top of what the yearly increase is. Ultimately, with everything that I've discussed tonight, my obligation is to the taxpayers of the city of Quincy, as well as the children, the families, the seniors, and the veterans. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. All right. I'm sorry, please, this is not a public meeting. Please stop. Please sit down, please. Thank you. So thank you very much, Councilor DeBona. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Yes, Councilor Finn.
Thank you, Madam President. And again, I figuratively rise, not in support of sanctuary cities per se, but in terms of a process at this city council that, you know, I've had the privilege and honor of being part of for close to 16 years. And again, I want to make a distinction that may be lost here this evening, is that there is no order before this body this evening saying that we should declare Quincy as a sanctuary city. What we have is a resolution on the part of one of our members requesting that we look at the issues related to sanctuary cities, and how, in what way that may impact local practices here in the city of Quincy. You know, in thinking in terms of this whole issue, that the right of persons to petition the government is something that's kind of goes as far back as to the Magna Carta. It's clearly enshrined in the First Amendment. It's part of Article 19, Part the First of the Massachusetts Constitution. And essentially what we have is we have a very divisive and polarizing issue without question. But what we did have undeniably is a number of citizens, voting citizens, who have been requesting various counselors, and I'm sure many have received the emails as much as I have. And so for this to come before us, I've been hard-pressed trying to think of a time I remember when such a resolution, which again, distinction between an order and a resolution is simply something asking for information. And I pose a question to my colleagues. The next time you think something's important to you or your constituents or it's raised, does it too have the danger of simply dying on the vine, not being referred to a committee where an appropriate discussion could be had? I mean, clearly, look at all of the folks we have on both sides of the issue who are here this evening, who really, within the context of an ordinary city council meeting, don't really even have the opportunity to be heard. But within the context of a public, and I want to stress, public committee meeting, that very opportunity would, in fact, really kind of present itself. I really think my colleague, my honorable colleague, Noel DeBona, as another counselor at large, raises some real serious issues, without a doubt, that there's some questions here. But the thing that we can't ignore is that a lot, and I mean a lot, has changed in a year. And it's something for a little, again, in terms of facts, based on governmental data, I think it's important to point out that the Obama administration has deported more people than any other president's administration in history. That's about 2.5 million. It's not even counting his final year. In fact, they've deported all the sum of all of the presidents of the 20th century. And again, between 2009 and 2015, that's more than 2.5 million people that have been deported. This doesn't include self-deported. This isn't those who are turned away or return to their home country at the border. And part of the success and the level of deportation that came about was because during that administration, they had worked in creating the so-called Priority Enforcement Program. And they constructed that program in conversation with major chiefs and police enforcement, local jurisdictions across the country. Now, from a police perspective, one of the issues that's really there is that they need to strike a right balance between getting and keeping people out of the community and still being able to have people living within their jurisdictions that will cooperate with police. The major cities chiefs association, which represents the 68 largest law enforcement agencies in the U.S., are very concerned with some changes that have taken place. And that was reflected, interestingly enough, when we were meeting here last Tuesday, Homeland Security issued that memorandum, which is that they're switching back to the Secure Communities program. And again, this is something that actually existed during the Bush administration, but tied into it also is the so-called 287G program that in effect can allow, again, it's voluntary to this point anyway, deputization of local enforcement agencies in carrying out the key mission of ICE around deportation itself. If you don't think that has possible, that commingling of those sources don't have serious tax ramifications for us, they do. And so again, whether I'm for sanctuary cities, which I personally am not at this, but, or whether you're opposed to it, the issues that are being raised are happening at a critical time, even as there's state legislation that's out talking about trying to make Massachusetts into a sanctuary state. So here's the rub. I mean, Councilor DeBona points out the critical connection between federal resources. And again, the president's threat to take that away from sanctuary cities. The Major Cities Chiefs Association has really opposes that, but what they've come out, they've asked an interesting question that we may have to ask. I've heard it referenced a couple of times that our current police practices actually represent the practices of a so-called sanctuary city. The question that the major police chiefs are asking, will you take away federal funding solely based on the declaration of being a declared sanctuary city? Or are you going to take away those resources based on what those practices locally might be? So I guess I'm raising the complexity of these things to come up to say that the resolution in and of itself may well be a timely one. Not one that I would have brought, quite honestly, but now that it's brought forward, Councilor Liang is my colleague, and I have a responsibility, as far as I'm concerned, when it becomes to a resolution like this, to support that. This body, in the time that I have served on it, hasn't run away from issues just because they're polarizing or just because they're difficult. We have often entered into that discussion, and quite honestly, through that conflict and through that discussion, often wisdom could prevail, and sane and smart types of policies emerged. And I won't go into to share with you all of the different things that I think have happened, but some of those particularly in the area of policing. And so it's timely. I think it's important. We can't bury our heads in the sand in terms of what's happening in Washington. And so I would support Councilor Liang's request and encourage my colleagues to do the same so that we might have this discussion in greater depth. Thank you, Madam President.
Please keep it down. Please, this is not a public meeting. Anyone else wishing to speak? Councilor Harris.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, a lot of discussion has taken place regarding my objection to my colleague, Councilor Liang's resolution on holding a discussion on the topic of Sanctuary City proposed 2 weeks ago. First off, I want to make one thing perfectly clear before I speak on the resolution put before us again tonight. I will not support the term sanctuary city to be labeled on our great city. I would oppose, thank you. I would oppose any legislation that changes the city's current policies to include a formal designation as a sanctuary city. The City of Quincy's Police Department has not and does not enforce federal immigration law, and it never has. It does not run immigration status at traffic stops. It does not track immigrants. It does not ask witnesses about their status. However, if someone is arrested for a crime and is booked and fingerprinted, that information is relayed to the federal government, which will report back any outstanding warrants or, in some cases, a deportation order from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. At that point, police will ask ICE if they would like the criminal suspect held. This has been the policy for many years, and the police chief has said it is a rare occurrence in any event. As I have said many times before, slapping a label on our city just seems to be a solution in search of a problem, and one that seems based on people's prejudged positions and not the facts on the ground. My position tonight, and has been since almost the beginning of this process, is to try to come to a peaceful resolution. On Thursday afternoon, I told the Patriot Ledger that I was opposed to Councilor Liang's resolution. I was going to vote against it. But you know, something happened on Thursday evening. Thursday evening, I held a Ward 6 community meeting, which was attended by about 50 people. One of the topics discussed was sanctuary city, and simply what does it mean? My colleague, Councilor Liang, attended and answered some tough questions that were thrown at her. And I was pretty impressed with that. And I was happy that she came to assist me. During this exercise, I realized that people in my ward want to know more information on this subject. Many seniors who attended this meeting were confused and nervous about this very controversial and volatile subject, which has been in our headlines and on the nightly news that they watch and see each day. These folks were reaching out for answers. For that reason, I will support Councilor Liang's resolution and vote yes on a discussion, and just a discussion only. Remember, one of the things in the amendments in the Constitution is freedom of speech. We can speak on and discuss this. If for some reason my colleagues do not vote in favor of this, and there is a call for more discussion by my constituents in my ward, I will certainly accommodate them and hold community meetings if need be. So if I haven't confused you already, I've confused myself, but thank you, Madam President.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Yep, Councilor Palmucci.
I'll be brief. I don't want Bill Harris to yell at me. I think we need to take some perspective on this. You know, I've really been disappointed with a lot of the comments that have been made by folks. I've had a lot of great conversations with people on both sides of the issue, but some of the comments have been just extremely nasty. And I guess I'm talking to the folks who are here because you're probably the folks who care most about the issue. Some of the comments have been really nasty. They've been really personal, really nasty. And they're just, we're better as a community than that, collectively. And insults have no place in a conversation. I don't care how you feel about the issue. Shouldn't be yelling at people, shouldn't be calling people nasty names and writing things on Facebook about them. I mean, it's shameful. We're better than that as a community. I expect more. Quincy has been Quincy has been and always will be a city that welcomes immigrants. That's our history and that's our future. From the Irish, the Italian, the Swedish, to the Chinese and Vietnamese, Quincy has always welcomed those seeking a better life, and we will continue to do so in the future. This is an important subject, and I get a lot of people very worked up about it, and they want to talk more about it. I'm okay with that. I'm not afraid of having a conversation. I welcome that conversation, and I think it makes sense that we have this as a discussion with residents. But I think that would be best done in a setting that allows counselors and residents to speak freely, ask questions of each other. This body doesn't do that. When something's before this body, as you saw tonight, there's not that same kind of discussion that can take place. Council rules aren't conducive to such a conversation. I'm willing, I've offered to Councilor Liang, I've offered to any other counselor, I'll co-host such a conversation. I'm willing to have this conversation. I think it's an important one that people care about with any counselor who wants to get together and host such a meeting. And I look forward to that public discussion. But this council isn't where conversations start. This body is where conversations conclude with action, with policy, with things that change the laws of our city. We either create new laws because there's a gap somewhere or something's not being done, or we change existing laws because they no longer reflect the way we feel about particular issues. This resolution offers no change in policy. It offers nothing other than, let's have a conversation, let's discuss what a term means, a very highly charged, politically charged term. And for that reason, because I find both the resolution in its form and in its intent to be confusing, that's why I'm going to vote no. But I look forward to having a discussion. I'm ready to host that discussion and participate with all of you and anyone else that wants to be a part of it. But in terms of this resolution, I don't think this is where the conversation should happen. I think this is where the conversation should end. So if we have a community meeting and there's some sort of issue that's brought up that we need to change current policy, then it comes here. And then we deliberate and we legislate and we change regulations to reflect the will of the community that we represent, and we put in place new policies or change existing policies. But this isn't the place where we just have conversations and discussions. That's better held in a community meeting, and that's why I'll be voting no. But again, I look forward to having this conversation with anybody that wants to have it in the future. Thank you, Council.
Councilor LaForest.
Thank you, Madam President. Councilor Palmucci, you expressed my sentiments pretty much verbatim what I was planning to say. I think hearing and seeing the audience here, for public to have input, this is not the forum. As a ward councilor, I host public meetings, community meetings, and get that input as a standard. Any project that's going to the planning board, I bring it into the neighborhood and let the neighborhood get an understanding and an informal opportunity to have a discussion, to have their questions answered, and get an understanding of what that impact is going to be to them. It's all about doing your homework and having a process and recognizing what the role of this body is as a governmental policy, as the legislative body of the city of Quincy. I, too, will be voting no for the resolution.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to be heard? Anyone else? All right, very well. I'll just speak briefly and then we'll go for a vote. I support our law enforcement agencies here in the city, here in the state. I am proud of the work they do. As many of my colleagues have pointed out this evening, this before us this evening, this resolution is not asking us to become a sanctuary city, whatever that term means. I don't think this forum is the proper one, as many of my colleagues have expressed, to debate, and make no mistake about this, this is not a discussion, this isn't a study, it's a debate between two sides who are very hunkered down in their beliefs. And so I don't believe this is the forum for that. We have rules, we have procedures here. This is a deliberative body that puts forth legislation, not for folks to talk about what they think. It would be 9 people up here discussing their thoughts, not listening to the public. And again, a lot of these issues are important. I'm not afraid of this discussion, nor is anyone up here, any one of my colleagues. Again, I do not support this resolution. I will be voting no. But again, I do not believe that this is the proper forum for this discussion. So with that, I would ask the clerk to take the roll.
Counselor Kane? No. Counselor Kroll?
No.
Counselor DeBona?
No.
Counselor Finn?
Yes.
Counselor Harris?
Yes.
Counselor LaForest?
No.
Counselor Liang?
Yes.
Counselor Palmucci? President Hughes?
No.
3 in favor and 6 in the no. Does not pass.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right. Reports of, yes, Counselor Finn.
Again, I do sincerely want to take some time to thank everybody on both sides who came out this evening. And what I'd really like to do is invite you all back in May when it's budget time. Please be out there, because that is the stuff that really matters here as well. So thank you all for your participation.
Great. Thank you, Counselor Finn. Reports of committees. Counselor Kroll.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Yeah, you want to take a brief?
Sure, we'll take a brief recess.
So.
(2016) 256. And Madam President, if you could recognize Counselor Harris in relation to the
Yes,
specific
Counselor
issue.
Harris.
Yes, at that, on Huckins, yes. Where are we? Do we have that? It's not in front of me. Yes, as far as the situation with Verizon and the pole at 125 Huckins, I would ask my colleagues I'd like to make a motion, wait a minute. I would ask that my colleagues, I'm speaking on, do I have to make a motion first?
To do what? What do you
I
want
want,
to do?
I want to disapprove the,
Yeah.
I'd like to,
So you're a no vote then? That's going to be your,
that's,
gonna
yes.
be your no.
And if I could speak to it.
okay, sure. Go ahead, speak to why
Thanks.
you're going to vote.
Well, I mean, so, folks, my colleagues, I held a community meeting, that infamous community meeting the other night. We started off with, the Verizon put on a presentation. You were here when I asked, I think it was 4 times, that would they consider moving that pole, moving the antenna they were planning on placing. They had no intention at all to listen to me, let alone that night. They basically brought 4 people. They brought a scientist. In this case, this device that they're putting in is not the fix-it of the problem with the service in Squantum. It's only a line of sight. I have a constituent that has a young family that as she spoke here at the public hearing, the bedroom of her children are right across from where the antenna is being placed. For me, I believe that in this case, the needs of one outweigh the needs of a few that are going to have, and it's only a few that are going to have improved service. I feel that Verizon has not acted with me as the counselor for that area in good faith, and I ask my colleagues to please vote no for that position of where that antenna is placed. And I promise you, if you come to me with the same situation, I will support you as well every time. Thank you.
You need a second, there's a second, right?
Yeah.
Briefly, the request is to say no to Verizon. You had me at no to Verizon. The double pole Kings of Quincy, I'm just happy that other people are willing to vote no as well. So I will certainly second that and also vote no.
Curiously, can we send this to the solicitor to find, are there going to be any legal ramifications? For Verizon coming back to us to sue us? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, we're good.
I wouldn't want to incur that expense. So
In your official.
is this something to look into?
We could ask the solicitor. I know Assistant Solicitor Petkin is here.
Are we going to get sued if we say no?
They're not putting up their tower?
For saying no, yeah, for not putting up their tower. There are federal regulations that govern this over our city council's decision.
I would have to do some research on that. I don't know off the top of my head, but I don't know that the city has any contractual obligation with Verizon to put up poles where they want them put up. Otherwise, it would negate this being debated before this body, if they could just do it as a matter of right. But it's certainly something I would look into for you.
Okay.
Then my question is, why did they even have to come up and speak in front of us in the first place? Was it just it makes, no sense. And it wouldn't be the first time we voted no and gotten sued as a body, right?
Great, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, Councilor Finn.
This is more technical, and again, I learned as chair of Public Works in my various things of that to very seldom contradict the ward counselor whose the issue is in that particular ward. But, and Councilor Harris has done all the work in relation to this, but I did get a curious communication from the representative on March 3rd, essentially requesting, Ms. Mason, and she was requesting another public hearing.
Oh, okay.
And I want to make clear, and I think I've already checked with the clerk, but certainly would want on the record, we already had a public hearing on this matter, and
Right.
that hearing was closed. And again, there was some agreement that they were going to meet with Councilor Harris, but
That's right.
we have had the public hearing, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Yeah, okay. Councilor.
I just want to be very clear now that people are talking lawsuit, that the reason I'll be voting no is based on Councilor Harris's representation. After doing extensive fact-finding and communicating with his residents that there is a desire to not pass this based on the negative impact that it would have on one particular homeowner's property value, sight lines, potential health effects, in that this decision that I would take is based entirely on that information as well as the public hearing.
Ditto. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No, oh, really? Okay. Councilor LaForest.
Through you, Madam Chairman, I think, of course, we have a law that says double poles must come down within 6 months, Councilor Palmucci, so I guess that'll be our countersuit when they have yet to follow our regulations. My curiosity, though, is procedurally, if we vote this down this evening, how does that then come back into committee? Are they legally able to refile the same request with an amended request of location?
I think the city clerk has to.
At any time, they can bring it back in, but
It's not like zoning where you got a no vote, it's dead for for a certain time certain?
no,
Okay.
not to my knowledge.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, Madam Clerk?
Counselor Kane. Counselor Kroll.
No.
Counselor DeBona. No. Counselor Finn. Counselor Harris.
No.
Counselor LaForest.
No.
Counselor Liang.
No.
Counselor Palmucci. President Hughes.
No.
9 nays. The
9 nays.
order does not pass.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now remember, you promised to vote for something that we, no. So everybody write it down now. All right. Anything else further, Counselor Finn? Counselor Finn? Okay, thank you.
Counselor Kroll.
Okay, Counselor Kroll.
Hello, Madam President. So earlier this evening, we held several Finance Committee meetings talking about 2 items in particular. First was 2017-003, which was the adoption of a finance policy and procedures. Committee debated that, made some changes, some amendments. So I would like to bring that out of committee and present it to the body and move passage on it based on the amendments discussed in committee.
Okay, motion to approve by Counselor Kroll, seconded by Counselor Finn. On the motion, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Counselor Kane. Yes. Counselor Kroll.
Yes.
Counselor DeBona.
Yes.
Counselor Finn.
Yes.
Counselor Harris.
Yes.
Counselor LaForest.
Yes.
Counselor Liang.
Yes.
Counselor Palmucci.
No.
President Hughes.
Yes.
8 members. Passes.
And also this evening, Council R 2017-28, which is an appropriation for $3,542,015 for the MSBA Accelerator Repair Program. We had the presentation, obviously, by the project team and members from the Public Buildings Department, and I would like to take this out of committee, place before the body with a positive recommendation.
Motion to approve by Counselor Kroll, seconded by Counselor DeBona. On the motion, Madam Clerk?
Counselor Kane.
Yes.
Counselor Kroll.
Yes.
Counselor DeBona.
Yes.
Counselor Finn.
Yes.
Counselor Harris. Counselor LaForest. Counselor Liang. Counselor Palmucci.
Yes.
President Hughes.
Yes.
9 members. Passes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I think that does it for reports of committees. Yes, no traffics? Traffics?
No.
No traffics.
Thank you, Madam President. Earlier this evening, we did have an ordinance committee on the pending LDA before us. That matter has been continued to March 20th at 6:30 PM.
Okay. Great, thank you. Presentation of petitions, memorials, or remonstrance. Yes, Counselor Finn.
Yeah, again, I know we oftentimes acknowledge the passing of people that we know who are deeply part of Quincy, and I just really wanted to acknowledge the loss of, the sudden loss of a former neighbor of mine, who is Jerry Mulcahy. Again, wonderful family here in Quincy, wonderful extended family of the Mulcahys and the Mocks and different people. Again, that this came very suddenly, and it's just a tragic loss. Hard to understand at times when this happens, but I just ask everybody to keep that family in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor Finn. Anyone else? Yes, Counselor LaForest.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just like to offer condolences. We laid to rest over the weekend William and Thelma Powers, who were the victims of the house fire in House Neck a few weeks ago. It's been a long 3 weeks. And I just want to ask people to continue to keep Michael Powers, the survivor, and his extended family in your thoughts and prayers, as well as to thank the Quincy Fire Department, the Quincy Police Department, and the community. We had an extensive fundraising campaign to help with their expenses, and the family has just expressed their deep gratitude to House Neck and to the city of Quincy, and I just want to share their sentiments. So please keep the Powers and Timko families in your thoughts and prayers.
Thank you. Thank you, Counselor LaForest. Yep, Counselor DeBona.
Thank you, Madam President. If I could at this time, I'd just like to extend my congratulations to the new 27 firefighters that just got sworn in as new recruits. You know, just thinking about what Councilor Forrest just said about the two passings of the Powers family, as well as there was a fire on Circuit Road this past weekend. There was a fire at 80 Clay Street this week. 4 were injured and 4 were displaced. 4 firefighters were injured on Circuit Road and 4 were displaced in that house. A lot of people say, wait a minute, 27 new hires. There's a lot of people that retired, and the city, as it's growing, we need to increase police and fire. So with that being said, is sometimes people question, oh, well, that's quite a bit of a number. Just seeing what has happened in the last month in itself, or what has happened in the winter with the fires that have happened, I give props to the administration and the mayor for moving a city forward with the new hires and the recruits, and they're going to have to go to the academy and graduate there as well. But I want to say thank you to their. We came here along with a few of my colleagues to the swearing-in ceremony on the 24th here, and it was a good crowd in here. So I want to thank those 27 new recruits, thank them, congratulate them, as well as their families. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Motions, orders, resolutions? Scheduling of committee meetings or public hearings? All right. Anything, okay, anything further? All right, at this time, just to let people know, March 20th will be our next meeting. At 6:30, we will be starting with the ordinance committee meeting, moving into our regular council meeting at 7:30, and as I'm looking at the calendar, April is upon us, my word. Okay, motion to adjourn, Councilor Palmucci, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you.